I'm back. Hello. I'm no stranger to being misunderstood. That kind of comes with the territory when you're a weirdo like me. My name is Justin. Hello. Hi. That's a great way to introduce yourself at a cocktail party if you want to keep the conversation short. For example, I have a library for Ruby called Standard Ruby, and it literally wasn't even my idea. It's a spiritual, transliteration of a library, an analogous library for JavaScript that's intentionally not configurable. And I remember when I was pitching this, as well as the kind of the initial rule set, to friends in the Ruby community saying, look, when you're formatting your code, arguing over the rules of the code is the hard part, is the stupid part. That's the waste of time. What those rules are matters far less than having them, so things are consistent to some base level degree, especially when it comes to rules that can genuinely catch bugs. But B, that it be set it and forget it, and you don't end up with all this time relitigating. And when I pitched it to people, I got almost universal negative reactions. People didn't understand why I'd want to do that. They took a lot of pride in their Rubocop config. They explained that their situation was a special snowflake and no general purpose config would ever fit what they needed. And the only person that I talked to in the Ruby community who got it was our very own, my silent co-host, Aaron Patterson, the one who writes these puns. To a certain extent, he's promoted it more than I have. And this podcast was the same sort of thing, where I told people in advance, well, this is the format, solo fella, just me, talking to you, similar to sort of a drive time radio, no background music, long gaps. Sometimes I will say a thing, and then I will think thoughts, and the gap will be long enough that you might think, oh shoot, did my AirPods do the thing where they just kind of pause the audio for no reason? Do I have to go check my watch or my phone and click, oh, he's talking again, right? And that's the format, but it's going to go on for 3 hours. And also, it's not going to be about anything in particular. It's just time to be with friends. And that's me. I'm the friend. Hello. The program's name, if you're not familiar, is Breaking Change. And here you are in version 24. This version's Breaking Change is titled Prophylactic Jet Lag. And that'll make sense in a minute. But yeah, the reason I bring up all that confusion, that distrust in my very odd tastes and the projects that I seem to find myself drawn to. I think I've gotten more feedback from people in the last 4 or 5 days that they finally understand why they'd want some rando talking in their ear for 3 hours a day to drown out the internal monologue in their head. I don't know why. It might be related to stuff going on in the news and people wanting to be able to think about literally anything other than that, failing, and then deciding I want to think about nothing at all. And if that's you, you've come to the right place, because this is about nothing at all. And I will continue to drown out those voices so that you can, get through your kid playing at the gym, get through the rehearsal for the dance recital, waiting to pick up the kid from, you know what? I'm not a parent. I don't know what parents do, but I assume that if I was a parent, pretty much all of my child's most important life events would be me with a single AirPod in my left ear, surreptitiously inserted while I listen to podcasts while they smile and have very meaningful life moments. That probably tells you that it's a good call I didn't become a parent. Well, if you ever wondered why anyone would listen to a podcast to blot out your train of thought for 3 hours, here we are. And I'm here for you. So I don't know if I'm going to make it to 3 hours today. But I'll, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Speaking of the news, this week I've reflected a little bit on my relationship to the news. I've joked a couple times this year that I've come to the realization that my interest in the news, and I follow it really, really closely when I have an interest, and then I follow it not at all when I don't. I go from consuming a ton of it, almost obsessively, to a total blackout. And apart from wanting to be able to stay productive and focused on whatever my work is, it's not a mental health thing for me. It's simply, I've learned this year that the thing that I want from news is to tell me the future. It's all I want. Just tell me what the future is. So that I can go back to worrying about everything else. And it's because the way that my brain works is I'm always gaming out every possible, no matter how improbable, every possible future that we could go down in all of these branching paths. And this is something that I think I was always this way because I was always a worrier. But when I started programming computers, I realized that when you hold a whole lot of context in your head of like, I've got all these variables, all these data, all this state, I've got all this behavior, I'm like building a kind of a recipe in my mind of like, got these ingredients, got these steps to follow. And I found that if I was able to hold all of it in my head, then I could sort of game out every single possible way to structure it and to mold it and to implement it. Different architectures, different styles, different implementation paths. And then I would be able to think, okay, well, that one literally wouldn't work. These 4 would work, but this one would be hard to test, or this one would lead to maintenance problems, or this one would be novel and interesting, but maybe difficult to communicate. And before my fingers hit a keyboard, maybe I've taken an hour-long walk and all my colleagues think I'm not working. Before I've even started typing, I've actually, in my head, worked through several potential solutions and eliminated them from contention. And so Becky calls that chessboarding because, if you've got a program that's designed, a traditional program, not necessarily a deep learning thing, but like back in college when I had a literal computer lab saying like, hey, you got to write a program that plays chess. And the way that they trained us to write these little programs, I think they chose a really an appropriate language for this exercise, by the way, because I'm pretty sure they had us write this in C. Game out all of the potential boards. So for any given movement, so for any given board state, however the board looks, there's only so many moves you can make. Maybe there's a discrete number of moves. I've got 6 pieces left, and they can move to these 150 different positions. And just quote unquote, like from a computer's perspective, this is easy. It's just monotonous. Think of the different positions you can do, and like, okay, so call that like basement level 1, right? Imagine you got the board, and then you've got the pseudo board underneath it with 36 boards because you had 36 possible movements. And now recurse another layer, and for all 36 of those boards, look at all the potential counter movements, and go on and on and on and on, and then in some time limit, call it a minute or something, determine what move to make, and do it by finding the very best or most favorable board, because you score the boards in terms of which one you're most likely to get a positive outcome or win. And usually the program that wins is the most efficient at pruning the bad boards early, so it wastes less of its time so that it can recurse deeper into the stack of, like, okay, well, and you talk about it in terms of how many turns ahead are you able to jump. And I know the reason that this is like a good programming exercise and something to teach programmers is that my understanding anyway, because I'm not like a chess player, is that master chess players also do the same thing in their brains. It's why Garry Kasparov, I'm sure this is apocryphal, but people would say he'd like burn 4,000 calories during like a championship match because his brain was overheating. I learned to think that way. So Becky calls it chessboarding. And while there's like a lot of uncertainty in the world, whether that's like the coronavirus pandemic in 2020, a big election coming up that has profound consequences, I can find a lot of comfort in turning to the news and asking it, hey, crystal ball, like if you can tell me that this particular outcome is extraordinarily unlikely, approaching 0%, then I will be able to sleep at night because my brain, instead of churning through every single possible future outcome, it's only going to churn through the other half of this branching path. And so that's what, people in America over the last 4 cycles would go to Nate Silver for. And he's got his own, he broke off from ABC News, so it's no longer 538. That's what seems to be one of his, run by his nemesis. You learn all this forecaster drama and the inside baseball of forecasting elections because you're glued, you in this sense being me, but maybe also you. You're glued to these little charts. What percentage likelihood is this or that going to happen? And they were so close to 50-50 throughout the entire election that I remained glued to my, political RSS feed way too much, but also like just the right amount for the way that I work and the way that I think. Now, did it change anything? No, of course. Consuming news doesn't change anything, but the sense of control one feels that they know the current state of the race, the state of the game, that they know the variables at play and the probabilities of those outcomes. For somebody like me with a brain like mine, I can find that very soothing and very relaxing. And the weird thing about it, right, is that when breaking news hits, some terrible fucking thing happens. If my brain interprets that as having a big effect on collapsing the possibility space of what might happen in the future, to like reduce the number of futures that I, Justin Searles, have to worrying about in the future, then I'll feel good about that news, even if it's tragic. But other people consume the news, I am told, like humans would. And they see tragic news and then they feel bad feelings because they're empathetic creatures. And I'm empathetic in my own way for sure, but because I go to the news to meet this other need of mine, that's where I end up feeling. And I'll often have reactions to the news that other people find insensitive or inappropriate. So anyway, for some reason, Tuesday at 9 p.m. when I was watching Steve Kornacki talk about counties in Georgia that I intend to never memorize the names of. DeKalb. Kind of names DeKalb. The numbers he was saying, he didn't have to say, this is the call, right? That's not his job. His job is to wink at the audience and say, this is how many votes are coming in, and this is what that looks like in 2020 and 2016, and this is what vote is left. And then he leaves as an exercise for the viewer the extrapolation. And so you see that, and you're like, okay, well, that's the path we're on. And so it was right around 9:15 p.m. on Tuesday that I felt a tremendous relief. A relief as in a disengagement, as in my brain let go And suddenly, you know, half the future. Now, whether it's the future I want or the future I deserve, I don't know, right? That's irrelevant in a sense from an energy expenditure and from a stress level, like a stress hormone, like an aggregate amount of worry perspective or thought, or play casting different potential futures. Yeah, it was as if, you know, a third of my brain just got lopped off. Like if you were looking at activity monitor for my, you know, mental state, this I was pegging like 8 CPU cores from the moment of, you know, whatever it was, like June 28th or whenever that debate was. That kind of set in motion one of the most tumultuous campaign cycles in U.S. history. From that moment all the way through 9:15 p.m. Tuesday night, I was consuming all of my available compute, Raspberry compute, and then at 9:16 p.m. I was down to like 40% CPU utilization. So that's a, you know, terrible metaphor and analogy, but like the of course the outcome of the news is what it is, and you know, that's where we are now. Good game, America. But I don't know. Yeah, that sense of relief is something that you maybe, and this is one of the reasons this show exists is to test hypotheses. Like, it is extraordinarily unlikely that any of us are the only person in the world who feels a certain way about a thing. But there's a huge Overton window, the huge, like, kind of like the space of where we have conversations in polite company that is more narrow than the range of human experience. And so one of the reasons I like this program is I don't have some, you know, co-host here to, you know, feign outrage or to draw this sort of line of questioning and thinking into a different direction or to do their own experience share. I do this so that you can think through as like, oh yeah, like I can deeply resonate with what Justin's saying and I've never verbalized it before because I'm not, you know, I'm not a creep and I want to maintain my my place in the tribe as being like a, you know, an upstanding member of society. And clearly Justin does not care about that. But I will ring the bell and say, okay, yeah, that's a good one. Or maybe you're listening to all this and be like, yeah, you know, ready to email me that I am exhibiting sociopathic tendencies. Don't worry. I was on twitter.com for a lot of years, you know, and I've had a lot of DMs and a lot of replies diagnosing me with all sorts of psychological issues. And so I'm grateful for that because then I don't have to pay a psychologist to do it for me. Anyway, I was getting my collagen this morning because I'm generally an anti-supplement guy. I don't like going off the rails. I like food. I like the nutrients that food provides me. But when you try to like isolate just one thing, it feels not like cheating. It feels maybe it's that it feels unnatural. Or maybe it feels like I'm giving up on just letting nature take its course and erode my body as quickly as God intended. But I was eating my collagen this morning because what I do is I take some collagen. I think 4 tablespoons every morning over 2 cups of coffee. I just dump it in my coffee and stir it in, and I never think about it again. Doesn't taste like anything. You know, it's an incomplete protein that is associated with, you know, ligament repair and skin and other kind of like connective tissue. And so since starting taking it, unfortunately for me, I was willing, Becky often suggests things to me, and I was willing to try it out. I tried it out, and then I was very unfortunately realized almost immediately that all of the different kind of, you know, casual injuries that I would get from weightlifting or from golf or from daily life I stopped getting those injuries. Oh man, no more neck aches. Oh man, no more like shoulder pulls or impingement. No more, back pain because I lied on my stomach for 30 seconds. And so now I'm a person who takes collagen every morning. But you look at it and first it doesn't smell great. It's kind of got an acrid smell. And because I have this discomfort with anything that seems unnatural, it's the wrong word. It's like manufactured, like there's nothing in nature. There's not a tree that I can go to and pluck a fruit and then open it up and the seeds are this shit, right? Or grind it into a powder with a mortar and pestle. Like this thing had to go through some kind of factory process. That's not to say factories are bad or chemicals are bad, but it's just like a weird thing to be doing every day for the rest of your life. It's just like if it was a pharmaceutical, right? Like I would hate to be on a pill and be told you have to take this pill every day for the rest of your life or you die. Or your life gets materially worse because now I'm like, well, I'm a minimalist, right? Like I don't want to have to carry that shit around with me. Now I can't travel or whatever. Or if I ever get stuck what if I get castawayed, right? What if I'm a simple, middle manager at FedEx and I'm on a plane and we go through a storm, right? And the plane goes down and everybody dies except for me. And then I swim somehow, improbably, but I don't have any recollection of this because I just wake up stark naked on a deserted island. And, I lose all hope until some boxes start showing up and I find a goddamn volleyball. If I get castawayed and I know that I need this pill to survive, I'm going to have a way worse time on that island with my volleyball friend. So that's why I don't want to take collagen every morning. So I'm looking at it and I think, where did this come from? Is this just bone meal? Did they just grind some, animal protein up to make this? Because when I look at like a steak, right? I maybe part of this is like living in Japan and having this, actively suggested to me. Or friends who are hunters who go out of their way to not waste meat and to do it in their own way, honor the sacrifice of an animal that you consume. That's what I was thinking about this morning. I was like, you know what? Well, thank you for this collagen and this, whatever, from whoever gave this to me. Hopefully, you had a good life. And sure enough, I look at the front of the label for the first time, which maybe I should have done sooner. And it doesn't say what animal. It just has a picture of a cow. And underneath it, it says grass-fed and like free range or whatever, open pasture, So I assume that means that these are cows. But it didn't say cow. And then I got interested and I started scouring the label. And I could not find a single written reference to cows. And so now I'm wondering, like, maybe it's just any number of barnyard animals. Or maybe, like, I don't know, squirrels. Whatever they can find. Whatever finds its way through some trap door and lands in the Rancor pit under Jabba's palace. Those are the things that... So anyway, that's a little bit about... my psyche. So thank you I'm glad that you were grass-fed, whoever you were. I might sound different to you today than usual because it's goddamn 4:30 in the morning. Eastern time. I never know if it's Eastern Daylight or Eastern Standard Time. I assume it's Eastern Daylight Time because it's the shorter one. Like, I spent 38 years of my life thinking that daylight savings time was exactly 6 months, right? It was half the year. And then only now that I'm older and wiser do I realize it's actually like a third of the year So it's not the full half. Now I say that, but remember, I can't real time fact check myself on this program, so maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. So because EST is normally what the acronym that my computer tells me it is, I assume that I'm in the short one because that's the winter one, and so I'm in EDT, daylight time, even though it's dark all the time. So I'm not thinking about daylight. I fucking hate. Why can't we just? Anyway, it's 4:30 somewhere, and the reason I'm up so damn early is that we're off to Japan again. We're leaving tomorrow, actually. So, sayonara. And something that I've started to do when I have the flexibility and I control my own schedule is a couple days in advance, I'll start going to bed earlier and getting up earlier so as to preempt the jet lag effect a little bit. Because instead of getting up at, our flight's at 7 a.m., instead of getting up at, 5 a.m. and rushing to the airport, if I could get up at 1 a.m., right, or 2 a.m., then I could have a real morning, get a good workout in, head to the airport, and then at 1 p.m. when they serve me dinner on a plane, my brain and body are actually closer to being ready for dinner, and then I can fall asleep on the plane, God willing. And ultimately, then when we land, 14 hours in the future, right, like 4 p.m. on Tuesday, I'll still be jet lagged, but it'll be more like a 4 or 5 hour fuckery instead of a 14-hour just shock to the system. Now, this is the third time I've done this, and this has probably been the hardest, probably because I'm doing it with Becky. This is the first time we've kind of like both been doing it. The previous 2 times I was traveling solo. And I wouldn't say it's not going well, but I would say like I am actively jet lagged right now, and I've never left my house. So this is a prophylactic jet lag. This is very on brand, right? For me to, why suffer later when you can suffer now is very, that's what I'm all about. It's how I approach work, software, life. It's, I finally got time to relax. Let's like yesterday, for example, I told Becky, hey, I might literally be asleep at 4 p.m. today. I'm pretty tired. And I said, I'm gonna play some video games. I'm gonna relax. I'm gonna wind down properly at like 2 p.m. We have blackout shades everywhere in the house. You kind of have to with the sunlight. And instead, what happened is my brain thought, well, I could relax, or open enrollment just started, and I could shop for healthcare and get that squared away. So that's what I did instead. So I've got my first ever ACA plan, thanks Obama, for next year. It's expensive, but it was so easy to give them my money, and it was really a breeze. And all the terms are like in plain language, like something like I don't think people understand how miraculous healthcare.gov is, especially if you never had to buy insurance in the private market prior to the ACA passing. So yeah, anyway, I'm grateful for that. I got that squared away, and it provided me a certain amount of happiness, but it did mean like the relaxing never happened. So that's just how I am, right? Suffer first and then enjoy life later. But also when the enjoy life later part comes, you remember, oh, wait, I've got other ways that I could suffer now. Let's keep pulling forward all that suffering. And then the back half of my life is going to be just gravy. That's how that works, right? See, other life news going on. Oh, I guess one other funny Japan thing. So this is the first time since 2020 when we moved back from a year there that I intend to drive a motor vehicle while I'm in Japan. You drive on the left side there, which is probably probably for most people the hardest part about driving in Japan. But the other hard part is, like everything in Japan, and it's a miracle of when they had their economic. I said it's a miracle of. It's an artifact of when they had their economic miracle in the post-war period, because just like how their industrial design is completely distinct, and as a result of having a whole bunch of American economists go to Japan and then teach these companies, like in Toyota's example, when Deming goes to Toyota and is like, here's how I would build cars. And it's just like an iteration on how America built cars. But there was never a copy paste of a bunch of files or a pipeline of like, just do it the American way, similar to how now architects around, like the top Western architects in the world all are just building shit in, it was China, now Dubai, right? So now we're just like, oh, I can't wait to go to Dubai and see these new American skyscrapers, right? Whereas in Japan, because we didn't have the information technology, like they just independently had to develop all this shit with, within some guardrails that, MacArthur and the post-war occupying force kind of like set for them. Which is to say that driving in Japan is a lot like driving in the West, except for the fact that all the signs every sign that could be different is fucking different. Because why isn't it? Because it doesn't have to be shaped that way. So like almost every other country has just normal fucking octagonal red stop signs, but no sir, not in Japan, right? The speed limit signs are also totally different. All the warning signs. Many of them, even though technically English is the other national language of Japan, so most signage throughout the country, especially anything, that's a national going concern, is going to be in English and Japanese, which is one of the reasons it's so easy to travel there. But like a lot of the shit, especially like local signage, is all going to be Japanese, right? And it's going to be symbology that only makes sense if it's grounded in Japanese culture. Additionally, people are very, very good drivers there. And so you'll stick out really badly if you're a bad driver. And I would contest that most Americans are not very good at driving. And I count myself among those mediocre drivers. And so the stress level is just kind of high. Driving in Nara in particular, because Nara is a historic, it's the cradle of modern historical Japanese society. So like a lot of the roads are really narrow. We had these crazy underpass tunnels where it's an underpass of just a footpath, not like of a railway, right? They'd have two very tiny asphalt roads, and the underpass would let you get by underneath all these kind of like rice paddies, but it would only be like literally 5 foot 11 inches tall and only maybe 6 feet wide. So you had to scrape your car through in a single file, but the tunnel was long enough that if a car was oncoming, this is a common, like if a car was oncoming, like then one of you has to play like politeness chicken, where now you're both reversing to get out. It's the exact opposite of what you get in America, right? Now you're both reversing to get out, and then you're both fully reversed and no one's in the tunnel anymore. And you're just sort of waving at each other, or no one flashes their brights because that would be rude. It's just sort of like, I would just find myself waiting, and then they would wait. And then I would say, well, if they're waiting this long, that must mean I should go through the tunnel first. So then I would start going, and then they would start going. And then we both back out again. And by then now there's like 25 cars on either side and no one's gone anywhere. And then I'll just kind of like motor on through. Just a lot of shit like that, right? Like it's like this would be a really frustrating conversation to have in person if we could speak in the same language, but instead it's just this cooperative dance of very, very narrow and tight infrastructure. And also my brain is wired the wrong way to get by, because I'm a dumb American with America brain, and I think like Americans would think. And so all of my instincts, maybe that's all to say, like my instincts when I'm driving in Japan are unhelpful. So I'm going to do it again because the places I want to get to are either inaccessible by rail, or if you go there by rail, it will just be you and a whole bunch of foreign tourists in the immediate vicinity of a train station. and all the cool stuff is either an obnoxious bus ride away or a very long taxi away or just not accessible. So yeah, it's leaf changing season, leaf peeping if you're from New England, where the color changing leaves are attractive. And Becky wants to see some leaves. She's like, I live in Florida now. I want to see some dark red fucking leaves on a mountain. And I'm like, that's fair. So we're going to do that. So anyway, to drive in another country, there was a treaty in the post-war period, a treaty that said, hey, anyone from any of these massive list of countries, the driver's licenses are reciprocal if you get an international driver's permit from your Secretary of State or equivalent agency or ministry in your country, and you take that permit with you to the foreign country, and it's properly sealed and notarized or whatever, then you can drive in that other country for a period of 1 year. And if you go beyond a year, you have to return to the home country for at least 3 months. Then you can get another IDP. Well, in America, we almost immediately outsourced international driver's permits to AAA. So AAA is the place to go to get an international driver's permit. I have found that there are a lot more AAA locations in the Midwest than in the South. We went to one. We found one. It was a bit of a drive. And we walked in. And this man greeted us. And he said 3 things. He looked at us. He immediately said, IDP? And I was like, yeah. Japan? And I said, uh-huh. And then he said, Mario Kart? And I kind of rolled. We both did. We were like, yeah? Uh-huh. And we start filling. He's like, here, these forms. It's like the number one transaction that AAA apparently does anymore. They sell insurance. They've got a membership. They've got the membership at this point is basically a coupon book. I don't think that down here there's like the AAA car care centers. That's where I used to take my car in Ohio because it was like a much more affordable auto mechanic basically. That was no bullshit than the other options in my area. But the forms were right at the top. They had 2 extra clipboards, all with just this form. We each grabbed a clipboard. We start filling out the form. The guy behind us is like, "Oh man, I'm going tomorrow. When you going?" And I'm like, "Oh fuck, what is this?" He's like, "Yeah, I just can't wait. Like, have you done it before?" I'm like, "Yeah, yep, sure have, bud." And he's like, "Yeah, it's just like so cool to see or whatever he's saying. He's going off. He's like to see Tokyo and drive around in the Mario Karts." And I was like, "Oh my fucking Lord, that's what this is. It's Instagram and TikTok and people seeing the goddamn motherfucking just man children and one of their girlfriends because you need a Princess Peach." If you haven't seen this, Tokyo, in particular Shinjuku and Shibuya, so like the big towering skyscrapers, like when people think of like downtown Tokyo and glitzy neon part of Tokyo, some smartass had the idea, it's been a while, 10 years ago, maybe a little more, to buy a whole bunch of whatever the smallest street legal, Japan's not really big on regulations. It's big on shame. So like a lot of things are allowed to be on streets technically, legally, but your neighbors and friends will shame you into not being an asshole. But if you are impervious to shame, as many of us Westerners are, you just kind of do it anyway and you disrupt society as a result. So what they do is they have these like go-karts basically that are really loud. They sound loud like the game, right? And they smell and they emit a lot of like smoke. And then they will buy 8 or 12 of them. And you'll put like a leader in front who will be the kind of like a tour guide. And your job, if you're driving one of these go-karts, is to follow the leader and you do a little lap, some course through Tokyo. And I'm sure that if you're one of the chuckle fucks driving one of these go-karts like a fucking idiot in a Mario hat, this is all unlicensed, right? Nintendo would love to kill this shit, but again, with limited regulations, like intellectual property law isn't quite as strong there, at least not in the traditional sense as it is here. So this is just a random tourist trappy kind of experience that people can have. And you follow them around and you make a bunch of noise in the middle of the night. And you pay probably a princely sum, probably the equivalent of the average Japanese worker's monthly rent, to goof off and be loud and be disruptive. And traffic is already very bad. Traffic is as bad in those areas as anywhere in Manhattan or in downtown London. Could you imagine just having a whole bunch of like fucking foreigners who don't even speak the language, much less know what side of the road to drive on, in loud ass go-karts in the middle of the goddamn night, every night for the rest of your life? Because that's what this is. So you walk into AAA now. You walk into AAA now, and it's not like, would you like to sign up to our membership that includes roadside assistance? You walk in, and they say IDP, Japan, Mario Kart. So anyway, I had too much pride. I may not have shame, but I've got pride. I had too much pride. At the end of that transaction, the man was very nice. He'd actually lived in Japan before. He'd worked at Tokyo Disney in the earlier days. And I had to say, look, just so you know, I need you to know I'm not one of those Mario Kart fucks. I'm a normal man driving a normal K car for normal people purposes. I'm not one of them. I literally want to use this driver's license like a driver's license. And not so that I can operate a go-kart and be part of the story of a crumbling society. And he didn't really react to that. But it was important that I said it. Let's see. Other stuff going on. We had a pre-Japanese massage. Got when you're surrounded by so many resort hotels, you could just take advantage of resort life sometimes, right? Drive over, sit by a pool, have a cocktail. And, I just talked about massages just a few versions of this podcast ago. And I don't mean like therapeutic massages. I mean, spa-like experiences. I like that kind of thing. I like to be forced to unplug. And we have a particular, do we say masseuse or is that like stewardess now? The first time we booked here, I remember they called them massage technicians. And that seemed weird. Massage therapist is probably the safest bet. So we have a massage therapist that we particularly like. She's great. We like her so much that we book her back to back. So that means getting a massage becomes like a whole afternoon experience for Becky and I. Which meant that like after my massage, I knew Becky was going to go in. So I had plenty of time just to kind of, lie down, read a book. And they have this nice relaxation area that guests are free to use before and after. So I'm lying down, reading a book. Actually, no. Scratch that. It's a solarium that you walk into, right? So it's like a detached structure. And I walked in. I was, escorted in by my masseuse therapist. And there's a chatty older couple of women in the corner. We're all just in robes. Typical spa stuff. And I sat down in the far corner on the other side of a plant because this couple of ladies were being pretty noisy. And that was fine. I was reading, I just finished a reread of that day, Courage to be Disliked, which is a book that had a big impact on me last year. I read it in Japanese. Now I finished reading it in English. Spoiler alert, reading as an English speaker, reading books in English goes a lot quicker. I was just sitting there minding my own business, and I was thinking, like, you know what? This is a great opportunity to practice reading a book, being present in the moment, and not letting myself get irritated by other people being inconsiderate. And then as the conversation went on, one of the two ladies talked about how important it is to be considerate. How, like, what she always rebukes her children for leaving stuff out or not leaving something leave a place better than you found it, kind of thing. And I was like, boy, that is ironic, because here they are with me in this room, this small space, and I am here, and they are being quite inconsiderate. This is not a Wendy's, ma'am. And but I'm like, you know what? Nope, not going to get frustrated, not going to get irritated, not going to say anything, not going to make my presence known. As a privileged white dude, I tend to play that card really quickly. But I was like, I'm going to slow roll this one. I'm going to just be a dude reading a book. I was very proud of myself. Here we go. Get ready for it. Their conversation took a quick left turn to a place where it became really apparent that the reason they were being so inconsiderate is that they had no fucking clue there was somebody else in that room. And I heard a lot of stories about bedroom fun times with men who were not their husbands, and about a certain backdoor variety of bedroom fun time and the mechanical details therein. And I was present. And at this point, there were several points of no return here where my opportunity to speak up and say, excuse me, ladies, I exist in this room right now. And I passed each of those points in part to prove to myself that I could at first genuinely overcome my own default irritation at other people speaking loudly or obnoxiously. But then by the second or third waypoint, it was like, oh shit, like they really don't know I'm here, and they are saying stuff that they would probably not say in the presence of a rando. And yeah, so I was present for that. It was a great way to unwind after a nice massage. And then they got up before I did. And I was like, oh, thank God. They're going to leave. They're going to walk out that door. They're not going to see me. I don't want to be seen right now. I went from I extremely want to be seen, so they shut up, to I don't even want to be here anymore. I want to go. And I almost made it, meaning they almost made it out the door. But then they, the first lady, who'd had the more exciting bedroom fun time from the sound of it recently. Ugh, God. She dropped like the lid to her reusable water bottle. She dropped it behind the fancy, awkwardly shaped chair. And because everyone's, nudie in robes, didn't want to like bend over and reach around and try to find, they reach around in the sense of not talking about the sex stuff. I'm just talking about getting this lid. Didn't want to do that. And so an attendant walked by, saw that she was struggling, came in, and then offered to like, oh, I'll pick that up for you and get it. And, don't worry, it's all good. And then the two ladies, they start leaving. And then the attendant turns to me, doesn't say anything, but just like acknowledges my existence. And as the two ladies are leaving, they follow that woman's eyes, and they see that I am there. And I was correct in my hypothesis that they did not realize I was in the room. And one of them just looks at me and just says to me, as if accusing me, "I didn't know there was a man here." And then the deer in headlights playing back of the conversation happens in real time. This is a thing that I've seen in various memorable moments of my life. And then it goes from stern statement to pretty profuse apology for being so disruptive and loud. And off they went. And now you have that memory. So here we are. And that's why I wash my hands before I use the bathroom and also after I use the bathroom. All right. Well, that's enough about me. Let's move on to follow-up. As I've mentioned on a couple previous versions, my recent conference presentation at Rails World in Toronto in September was I announced on stage it would be my last conference talk. And I did that because in my heart, what I wanted to say was, this is my last conference talk in English, but if for like language learning purposes, I choose to do one in Japanese, like that doesn't count. I think I even said that in a previous version of this podcast because I just wanted to set the record straight on that. Now that I have imminent plans of contorting myself into all sorts of stress balls to do that, but it's one of the areas where my focus is going next is Japanese language. So I want to find a way to balance time between learning the language and building tools to learn the language. Last time what happened was I took all of my free time to build a tool for learning the language, and then every time I sat down to actually learn the language, I would use that tool and I would find bugs or opportunities for improvement. And those would distract from the learning because I'd be like, oh, I gotta go fix this or fix that. And then I'd be at my computer just writing Ruby and JavaScript instead of actually learning. And so it was strangely ineffective for my own education, even though tens of thousands of people still continue to use it today. And they seem to like it. They seem to be getting something out of it. But it was my last talk, like of the ones that you're probably ever going to watch. And when I do a conference presentation, I always ask the organizers, hey, I'm doing this for free. I'm happy after my talk to offer up to you a native screen recording of pixel perfect from ScreenFlow. And they almost never take me up on that. Sometimes they take me up on it if they have a capture issue. But they've got these HDMI breakout boxes that they use to capture your video from. And these are usually fine, but not great. In particular, they tend to be bad for color reproduction. So when Rails World put up their official videos, they didn't take me up on the offer of having my slides up. And the very first version of the video that went up had like a lot of flickering, especially in the beginning of the video. I couldn't understand where the flickering was coming from. I'm pretty sure it was something in the menagerie of cables and breakout boxes and capture cards that they were using. Additionally, the colors were way off. Like things that should have been pure white were coming across as like beige and khaki colored. So I chose not to share the video. Additionally, the first edit that they did, they've since gone and re-edited the videos, which is incredible because they wanted to set a higher bar for quality, which I really respect. I didn't complain about the videos, but they came back with another edit that spent more time with didn't miss as many slides with trying to kind of the first edit kind of cleverly panned back and forth between video of the speaker and then video of the slides. And I'm sure that works for most speakers, right? Because most speakers will have a slide and it'll sit up there for seemingly forever. Oh, excuse me. If you can hear that in the background, it's 6 a.m. and so the blinds in my office are raising. So that's that robot sound. If you can't hear anything, I'm just talking to myself. Sorry about that too. But now the blinds are going up and it's still dark out. So yeah, if you're a normal speaker, right, like that strategy of editing, like, oh, and now we got a close shot of their face and now we'll go to the slide and we'll go back to their face. But like that does not work for my style, where on average, I think I'm hitting the next button every, I don't know, 6 seconds, maybe. And so the version of my video that went up right away got a ton of views right out the gate, and people said that they liked it, but I was dying inside because I knew that like entire riffs that I was doing made no sense because you couldn't see the visual. So I wanted to do my own cut. So I always offer this up, and then I always ask for in return, or just ask for generally, hey, and if you could, I'd really, really love your audio and video captures, those streams, those feeds, so that I can do my own edit for posterity. Because I have a particular style that I like to edit my talks in. And I genuinely do like just want to have copies of them all. Unfortunately, a lot of the ScreenFlow files got corrupted at some point. So I lost like 7 or 8 years of still editable masters. But I've got like at least the baked MP4 files or H.264 files for pretty much every talk that I've ever done that had a camera on me. And Confreaks, who did Ruby Conf Rails Conf, their owners were always incredibly gracious to let me do a quick like USB or SD card swap. I'd always hassle them at the end of every conference and be, with my laptop piled on top of a bunch of their gear as they were packing up to try to extract my video so that I could do, and I would do a super quick turnaround. So my videos usually went up way before the conference did. And I would do this to get the word out, but also to have some modicum of control over how my work is presented. But fundamentally, like that's one reason I'm giving up conference speaking, is like you don't have that control. You don't control the room you're in. You don't control the lighting. You don't control the audio. There are just a ton of variables that are outside your control. And if you spend a lot of time building something and then the things that are out of your control don't go well, and if that happens a lot, it's really frustrating. Well, I'm incredibly grateful again, because Amanda Perino, the executive director in the Rails Foundation, who's also been organizing this conference, not single-handedly, but seemingly, like she's managing a lot. Very impressive for the amount of coordination she has to do. She promised me she'd get me those videos, but first, first priority was getting these edits and then the re-edits and the uploads. And she did. So I got 2 video feeds, each with audio. I got some SRT files for a few different translations of the subtitles. And I think I got them Friday night. Got them Friday night, so Saturday morning. I was planning to record this podcast, but instead I was editing the Searles cut, or like a empowered programmer Justin's version. Posting that to YouTube, writing a quick blog post explaining what I changed, and then sharing that with some friends. So because I never actually shared a link to the talk video until yesterday, basically. So even though it's old news, it's finally available to watch in a format that I would recommend watching it. It's not a perfect presentation. A lot of those things that were outside my control did not go my way that day. The lighting was really rough. It was an outdoor venue and it was really sunny, and so like the screen was not particularly visible. And by the time I was speaking, there was a decent amount of sun in my eyes. So like the video feed looks really nice because I'm well illuminated, but the wash on the slides was so bad that it was difficult to get out of my own head, realizing that I was saying things that wouldn't quite make sense to a lot of the audience who didn't have eagle eye vision. But I had to for the sake of the video, right? For the sake of not wasting my own time, try to flush that and try to just like soldier on through it anyway. And as a result, even though, God, in the rehearsal that I did in the hotel room a few hours prior was just so tight. Not a single not a single missed blown transition. Like I nailed it. But I was so bent out of shape and frustrated by that stuff out of my control in the run up to my actual presentation that it was my delivery just isn't there. So it's hey, and that's the thing, right? Like that's you do it live, right? Like it's a genuine stage performance. So check it out. You know, of course I say this and everyone's like, oh no, you didn't say that. You didn't say that. But like, yeah, that's how feedback, you never fucking know if people are just being nice. You tell people that it's your final talk and then they end up just being nice to you because they're like, oh, well, what's the point in giving them feedback now? So also fair. You know, if somebody thought that I was bad at it, I had somebody say, it's like, well, you know, like, I wouldn't tell you if I thought it was bad. I was like, well, if it's my last one, you know, maybe it's a good thing I'm quitting if you think I'm bad at it. Anyway, so that's up. I'll share the link. Other follow-up item. I've been talking a lot this year about how Google sucks because that is readily apparent to anyone who has used the internet for more than a couple years. Google's search results are just hilariously useless. They're not helpful. And you know, the outside world is all becoming AI chum and listicles and content. And Google is trying to adjust. Got a news item about this later in terms of what they link to and how they prioritize those search results. But one of the things that is really struggling is if you're a power user of the internet and you use search engines to answer very particular questions or to, like you would at a library, try to use it as a reference tool to find a particular thing online, as opposed to a dartboard where it's just like, hey, I want something that's like generally like something on the topic of this. Like Google's good at coming up with, here's shit about this topic. Here's shit about like, you know, oh, I want Nike something or other. It's like it'll send you to like the top results now are just like, here's like Nike's official web pages, as opposed to something about like a third party review from like a really nice, thoughtful reviewer, right, about these Nikes, which has content creators really frustrated. But I'm sure like normies, it might actually be a better experience for them because they probably just want to go buy the fucking shoe. And because Google makes money off of Nike and sponsored placements and stuff, like it seems like that works for them. Additionally, as they get more and more into AI, they're just sort of, you know, using Gemini built-in search results to tell people nonsense in line, and that keeps them on the Google platform. So yeah, no news there that Google search results suck. But for the first time, I paid money for a search provider. I've had a lot of friends who use it, who told me that I should use it, but I just couldn't get over the $10 a month for a search engine. And you might know what I'm talking about. It's called Kagi. Kagi, I assume they named because Kagi is the Japanese word for lock. It's actually also the word for key. Both are called Kagi. I don't think it's a homonym either with different Chinese characters. I think it's like literally the same one. It's like a combined unit. It's sort of like corn on the cob and corn off the cob. Like, because a lock comes with a key, you know? It's like you go to the store and you buy them. Like, it's like sometimes they're even in, you have to open the package and extract the two. So yeah, Kagi is $10 a month for unlimited searches. You can pay more, I think, if you want some AI nonsense layered on. I thought it would. One thing holding me back from really seriously trying it is I thought it would be slow because it's third party, you know, because it's like there's no way they're at Google scale. But they're actually, the results come back lightning fast, and the results are almost always what I want above the fold. And that's impressive, right? Like Maybe it's that the things that were really hard from a data and computational perspective 20 years ago are no longer that hard. And maybe a lot of Google's challenges are of their own creation or the result of perverse incentives or tech debt. I don't know. But Kagi seems like they solved a thing that a lot of other industry players like Microsoft and Apple have been play acting as if it is unsolvable, which is search results that are not terrible. So I strongly recommend checking it out. The shame about Kagi, especially if you're in the Apple ecosystem, is that you can't just set it as your default search engine. One does not merely set an arbitrary search engine if you're in iPhone Safari or even Mac Safari anymore. I think Mac Safari at one point you could just type in like an arbitrary search engine, but now you have to choose from these, basically Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, and then 3 others you've never heard of. And the way that you set Kagi up is you have to pick one of those providers, Ecosia or some one of these things pretends to be like it's a green energy or sustainable energy search engine, and because Apple's got this 2030 green goal, they added that one. So you could take that one and give the Kagi Safari browser extension rights to read from that page, and then set that Ecosia or whatever it's fucking called search engine as your search engine in the address bar, so that when you type shit in, it actually will first query that server, which sucks and is an extra network hop and is unacceptable. And then Kagi will, the extension will take over and redirect you back to Kagi. So that's real stupid. And if anything, antitrust being what it is, there's a 0% chance of Apple buying a search engine anytime soon. But at the very least, they should make it more an option that you can turn on in Safari. Maybe they work something out with Kagi and say like, hey, we'll even let people buy it inside of Safari in the Apple ecosystem, right? And then they can get their 15 or 30% cut. But anyway, yeah, if you haven't tried it yet and you're at all Kagi curious, I strongly recommend you check it out. I've been very impressed. Another thing that I was hesitant to try back at WWDC when macOS Sequoia was announced, they talked about the iPhone sharing from Mac. So when you're on a Mac, there's a new iPhone sharing app that shows up in your dock by default. You click it, and a little iOS simulator looking thing pops up, and it says, hey, unlock your phone, do these steps. And the first thing you can do is you can use your phone from, even if it's in your pocket or if it's in your bag, or if it's, in my case, I was hoping to be able to use this when it was like in another room. But because it's doing this, I think with Bluetooth as the primary way to if not transmit data, then at least securely authenticate, not able to use it very far away. But you can use it just like you would use an iOS simulator. And unfortunately, all the keyboard shortcuts are unnecessarily different, but also the keyboard shortcuts for the iOS simulator app in Xcode are unacceptable. They're just nonsense. You can use the whole phone, just like, pretty much anything you can do from the phone, you can do from this little window in macOS. So if there's some mundane thing that you have to do, like in my case, I was setting up RetroArch for this trip I'm about to take, the game emulator. I was drag dropping some ROMs in the Files app. If you ever used the Files app in iOS, like an iPad OS with the trackpad, it's not so bad. It's slow, it's clunky, Finder's way nicer. But an iPhone, when you're doing this with your thumbs, it's just like not a good time if you got to do anything complicated. And immediately it came to mind, like, what if I used this iPhone screen sharing thing? Launched my iPhone, and then I put a Finder window side by side with the iPhone window, and I tried drag dropping all of these ROMs and folders and right clicking inside of the iOS Files app using my actual mouse on my Mac. Would that work? All of it just worked. All of it worked. It worked. I did not expect this to work. It would have like a little importing dialogue. Excuse me. to have a little importing dialogue. So a little like wheel of progress would fill up as things got copied, but it was as fast or faster than AirDrop was. Uh, yeah, compressing, expanding stuff, moving stuff around. It was so much easier to do with a fucking mouse. And ergonomically, looking at a computer screen and having a Finder window right next to it. So basically, all of the universal control crap and continuity stuff that Apple's started sprinkling into the Apple ecosystem maybe 7-8 years ago. This is a pretty impressive end game for that. Now, I'm sure they could take it further still. In fact, they do take it further still. In that, once you have this iPhone sharing thing set up, it will ask you if you want your notifications to also get delivered to your Mac, because there's a certain number of applications that are just not available on the Mac, a high number. And for example, my 8 sleep bed, my refrigerated bed every morning has an alarm that goes off. I don't use it. Like, it has a vibrating option, and I don't want a vibrating bed necessarily, at least not to wake up with. But it turns itself off every day at like 8 a.m. And it does that by triggering an alarm, and it has an interactive notification on iPhone, which is never nearby me in bed, to snooze or dismiss or cancel the alarm. And you can, interactive meaning you can press hold and click. Well, now my Mac is starting to get these notifications too, and I'm usually already up and at a computer working by 8 a.m. And so I see the notification, and then because interactive notifications and APNS are all the same across all of Apple's platforms, you can just like click the drop down and click dismiss or click snooze or whatever right there from Notification Center in your Mac. That's like, I don't know. It's very impressive. Now, it's unimpressive that I have this notification in my life at all. It feels like something that 8 sleep, which could detect that there hasn't been a body in it for 3 hours, might just turn itself the fuck off. But that's not Apple's fault. I think Apple, that's very impressive. Another of the new features that I'm excited about. So iOS 18.2 is currently in developer-only beta, and you can opt in not to Apple Intelligence, but to specifically image generation, Image Playground. You open this new Image Playground app, and then you request early access to that. And I'd requested it, and then as of this morning, I have it. So on my iPad, I've not put on the developer in general before traveling internationally. Putting developer betas on your phone seems like a stupid idea. So I haven't done that, but I wanted to put it on the iPad so I could request the early access. And I got it on the iPad, and I immediately open Image Playgrounds, see that I'm in it, and I start typing, prompts right away. I was like, the first one I wrote was, I think, Becky wearing a cowboy hat and looking shocked. And then it asked me to pick which Becky, and it took like 10 or 15 different pictures of Becky, and then little Pixar-like animated or animation style illustrations of those 15 versions of Becky. And I was cycling through them. And then I told Becky about it, and I showed her. She was sitting next to me. I showed her the iPad, and I said, "Hey, here's this." And she just said, "No, you're not allowed to do that. You can do that about yourself. This is just like the Persona thing. Why can't Apple just let it go?" And, a lot of people have those reactions. I've heard from a couple of folks that the idea that you could use an Apple tool to generate a illustration of somebody else, like a friend, and send it to that friend is creepy and a violation. And maybe it's just because I'm more public than a lot of people with my life, but I'm always tickled. Like, people used to Photoshop me on shit at work, and I thought that was hilarious. So I understand that people might feel that way, but I don't feel it myself. So it was good to get that real-time feedback and realize, yeah, connected to Becky's traumatic Vision Pro experience of seeing her persona for the first time in the Uncanny Valley. It's like getting transported into Polar Express hell with fake Tom Hanks. Well, this is apparently the same thing for her. And I get it. I was looking at it just critically. I was like, I could do way better fake AI Becky's. Give me some Stable Diffusion. Give me some Mid-Journey. Even ChatGPT, obviously, way more advanced. So I started playing with some other image playground stuff, and it's generally bad. It's, as one of these goes, it's bad. Now, whether Apple should have done it at all, yada, 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 who the fuck cares? It's not good, and I think most people will not use it. I think it's like Memoji or Animoji, in that it's a funny little demo, and then people will quickly forget even how to get to it from the iMessage screen or whatever. So that's neat, but that's not what it's about. The reason I wanted this beta was for Genmoji, which is to be able to generate my own emoji, and then thanks to the magic of UIKit, or Apple's UI frameworks, the magic of attributed string, you can generate an emoji, have it be a little image, and have it just live in line in a string of text. And that is powerful, because now I can make a fried shrimp with a cowboy hat, and then I could just put that in a sentence and leave people feeling excited and confused. And so that was the first one that I did, was fried shrimp with a cowboy hat. He didn't look fried enough. He was pink, like he'd been cooked. So I tried tempura fried shrimp with a cowboy hat. And so I didn't mean to gender them. They looked, at that point, quite deep fried. Still smiling. Still with teeth. Right? But it was on a plate. And I couldn't get it deplated. So something about, deep fried, I settled on deep fried. Deep fried looked almost fried. It was like, it probably is what a shrimp would look like if fried in oil, but I wanted some breading, right? On the shrimp. I'm realizing now some of you are going to think he maybe cares too much about this particular emoji, but I was just testing the fences, as one does. So it could do deep fried shrimp, and that looked okay, but not breaded. Tempura fried, it really, like once it became food, it had to be on a plate. It couldn't do the food off a plate. I went back to Image Playgrounds and I was like, is this just like, does it not know how to do anything? And I went back and I said, Justin, I think, in a backpack battling a fried shrimp with a sword. And the pictures that came back were just, I think of the 8 that I generated, only 1 actually had a shrimp in it. And the shrimp looked very unnatural. And no battling was happening at all. So additionally, if you misspell any words, it just sort of says, fuck you. It's really funny, actually, because you got AI on the text side that's system-wide that can correct your spelling. And then you've got AI in the image generation side that literally doesn't know what to do if anything is misspelled. Because I was spelling cowboy for whatever reason. Maybe my O was stuck on my Magic Keyboard on my iPad, but like it was a COWBY. I typed a few times. You misspell anything, and it just says, nope, try again. Nope, I don't want to do that. So Image Playgrounds is bad. Don't look forward to it. Genmoji is incredible, and it's going to be such a great way to troll your friends and confuse them, especially, because like emoji or small text is really, you know what? This might be a good time to jack up your font display size in iMessage, because when you see one of these new Genmoji, you're going to want to be able to like figure out what it is and see what the art is when it's just in a normal string. But they're like, we're talking 20 pixels by 20 pixels. Like, that's hard to tell. It's like, is that shrimp with a cowboy hat happy to see me? Is he deep fried or was he boiled? Because if it's a steamed cocktail shrimp with a cowboy hat, that sends a totally different emotional valence than if he's deep fried in a cowboy hat. That just, the connotation is way different, right? Of course. So yeah, I think that some of these Genmoji are going to be difficult to interpret when they're used in line, but also they're only amazing because you can use them in line, and so therefore I will be doing that a lot. Also, the same story, right? If you use them as a tap back in an iMessage, we're not talking about a lot of pixels here to like suss out what it is, and of course the system provides you with no way to like zoom in. It really should. It should have a loop or something at this point where you can kind of like, appreciate just that Genmoji, or maybe even add it to your collection like Pokemons. And that's it for follow-up. I've been staring in my upper screen monitor for a while because Aaron wrote me a pun, and it's a medium length, if you're curious. I don't know what it says, just like always. I don't know what it says, but I'm gonna rank it. So I'm gonna wipe away my tears and scrub away this text. And here we go. Drag it to my lower screen so I don't crane my neck. All right. A lot of people are worried about their code getting too complex. And in Ruby, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of case when. I'll read it one more time and I'll try to explain for the non-Ruby developers in the room. A lot of people are worried about their code getting too complex, and in Ruby, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of case/when. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm going to copy this so it stops jumping around my screen. Come on. Hop that over. I'm not going to put it in the list yet. Just going to paste it somewhere safe. So what this means, right, is in Ruby, or in like most programming languages, you have if and else statements. If this, do this, else this. Ruby has those too. A lot of programming languages will have a switch statement. So you can like say switch and then given different values for this variable, do this block or this block. Ruby doesn't have a switch statement. It has a case statement. And so in the case of X, when the value is this, when the value, it's functionally very similar to a switch statement. And so, not to go too far in explaining the joke, but it's like saying a lot of people are worried about their code getting too complex, and in Ruby, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. In fact, that's literally word for word what the joke is, except it's also got the word case in there because case when is like the combo set of keywords. And it's important to Aaron that because he's a low-level programmer, that his jokes tokenize and parse correctly as valid Ruby syntax. So that's where we are. So that's the addressable market for this pun is smaller than a lot of ours. And that has me already looking at the middle of the chart as probably the ceiling. Also, Aaron, you got a typo. You meant TOO complex. I'm going to normally I don't correct his typos, but we're going to fix that one. I'm not even going to put a sick in brackets afterwards. All right. I've never been in a hurricane, but I heard it blows. This is just below that. Then he's got that one from version 16 that's like a goddamn paragraph, which I'm not going to read. Then he's got, I recently traveled to Toronto for work. I refuse to take a red eye, though, because I feel they are a fly-by-night operation. That's better than this. Justin kept asking me to make a Halloween-based pun. I guess he was afraid I might ghost him. This is of a piece. Okay, so I think this is of a piece with that one. It's just that this one's also a little bit more specific. and less universal. So I'm going to rank it right below that one, which would make it our new number 18 pun. So version 24 of the podcast. A lot of people are worried about their code getting too complex, and in Ruby, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of case/when. I always try to work up to a place where the delivery on these is not so bad. Thank you, Aaron. We appreciate your work. All right, let's get into the news. Some internet fans of Nintendo are mad because Nintendo keeps announcing things that are not the successor to the Switch console. Whether they're talking about the museum that just opened in Kyoto or the alarm clock that they released. Or choosing election night of all nights to announce, hey, just FYI, but the next Switch console is gonna have backwards compatibility. They're doing everything except announcing it. Well, they've out of the blue did a direct video announcing a music app, and this music app is just like Spotify or Apple Music, except it only plays Nintendo music. So they've got curated playlists. They've got a really neat feature where you can take a track and extend it to 30 or 60 minutes, which is great for the background listening tracks, like something out of Animal Crossing, just some kind of cozy. If you're feeling like you felt in April 2020 and just want to have a cozy time, wouldn't know why that might be right now. I strongly recommend you check out the Nintendo Music app. It does require a Switch Online, Nintendo Online account subscription, but those aren't very expensive, especially if you play video games. I'm generally not impressed with the quality of Nintendo's mobile applications. This one is really nice. One could ask, hey, why wouldn't Nintendo just put all their shit to stream on Spotify and Apple Music? And I have wondered this. They were always really protective of all of their soundtracks, even when I was like, in middle and high school and I was interacting with their public relations folks because I was doing a lot of blogging about Nintendo shit. I remember it was easier for me to get free games from them in the mail, like pre-release or at release for the purpose of as review copies. But when they were releasing soundtracks, on disc, forget about it. A lot of those were limited run. The music they've always just been a little bit precious about. So it doesn't surprise me at all that this is its own bespoke app. But it's surprisingly good, and it's great to just easy to listen to. The only thing that sucks is there's no Mac app. So if you're working at a Mac, you can't just load it. Although I guess I think that if you were doing that iPhone sharing that I discussed earlier, I believe that will pipe audio in, so it would allow you to play audio from your phone that way. So maybe that would work. Anyway, check it out. This is just a public service announcement that app exists and seems good. Our next news item, I am 6 years late to the story. Fresca has rebranded, Coca-Cola has rebranded Fresca, the 0-calorie grapefruit soda beverage that I think came out in the 60s. It has rebranded as of 2018 to say that it is, I'm going to pull up a picture of the label. Loading. Fresca, established 1966. Old-timey, font. It's got, sort of silly, very... trying to think of a good word for the art style. I don't know art styles very well. It doesn't look like, it certainly doesn't look like some sort of Mountain Dew product. It looks much more like a LaCroix can or a Perrier can in terms of like little art patterns. I think if you zoom in, it looks like a little fleur de lis in the middle of this fan. And then underneath it says sparkling flavored soda with other natural flavors. And then there's I think on the box that Becky bought, there's like different levels of how grapefruit forward it is. Impressive, right? Because Fresca is everyone's least favorite soda, or it's the one if you drink a lot of soda, it's like, well, I haven't had Fresca in a while. It is definitely just a grapefruit flavored pop. It's what it is. It's 0 calorie, right? So like the one thing it had going for it was really early to the market in terms of being 0 calorie. But they saw the LaCroix and other, bubbly and all these people just selling carbonated water with, you look at LaCroix, it's basically homeopathic Italian soda. There's so little. It's just, I think they even call it essences of flavor. Now, LaCroix I like only because the name is a pun, because they're from La Crosse, Wisconsin. And so dressing it up like it's French, LaCroix, is like very funny to me. And they get points for that. But also like it doesn't taste like anything. And that is less fun. So the Coca-Cola exec said, Fresca hasn't said anything to consumers since 2008, and our awareness with younger customers is very low. I like to think that some number of Gen Z customers strolling through the grocery store who grew up on LaCroix in their very fancy childhoods picked out a Fresca by mistake and opened it up and then just experienced this explosion of flavor and they didn't know what to do with it. So that's been thinking about that a lot this week because a Fresca tastes a lot better than LaCroix, it turns out, because people like sugar or sugar flavored chemicals. Also in Fresca news, because I was Googling for like when did this happen? Some number of years after that, I think this is actually just recently, was it 2022? They came out with a Fresca vodka sodas with 5% vodka. So whereas most of the, canned cocktails in America are basically malted beverages. They're just, fermented sugar, similar to like a beer or Zima. And garbage, and they upset our tummies in this family. A vodka soda is a wonderful thing to have, and like High Noon, that's a brand that like won't fuck you up too much if you prefer liquor to fermented sugar water. So I was reminded that Coca-Cola got into the canned cocktail game because of course they did. I mean they've been in that game in Japan for several years. So yeah, if you want spiked Fresca and you're too lazy to do it yourself, it's also an option. I know there's a breaking news, everybody. Another news item. I guess this could have been follow-up, but it's Petapixel did an article a year ago. Oh, this is also not exactly breaking news. So right around when iOS 18 came out and people are really focused on all of the new camera settings, there's a setting in camera that was rediscovered, and a lot of bloggers started talking about it. And the settings name is prioritize faster shooting, and the description suggests that when enabled, your pictures will look worse, but if you tap the shutter button quickly, it'll go faster. Now, one thing that we've known about the camera team is similar to the Safari team in one way, which is that Safari is never allowed, or this used to be true, was the build would fail if it got slower. So Safari had to stay fast in order to pass the build, which means they would never ship anything that was slower than the before one. And that was effective at keeping Safari really, really fast and live. Especially when you compare to Chrome, which became really bloated and slow. Now, like that we're so far into the smartphone age, early on, the Photos app was very quick because the Photos app didn't do anything. It was just a little potato cam. And on Android phones as well, it was pretty quick. But pretty quickly, it was clear that the camera team at Apple had their own standard that they wanted it to be truly what you see is what you get. Whatever the preview is in real time that you see on your screen, when you hit the shutter button, that is what you're going to get or better. You're not going to get some capture, that's 45 milliseconds later. You're not going to get some degraded image or some image that looks totally different. And having it run the entire image signal process in real time continuously while you're looking at it is one of the reasons why cameras drain battery, because that sensor is getting used and all of the little CPU bits are getting exercised for every second that the preview of the camera is open. This does take a lot of compute. And so when you are burst shotting or clicking really quickly, it has to work harder. And so if you read this setting as prioritize faster shooting, as I think what happened was a lot of Apple bloggers and commentators speculated, oh, you mean I tend not to take a bunch of pictures really fast, or I do appreciate the real-time previews, but I'd be willing to give that up a little bit. And if it meant that I was getting higher quality images. So then I got a bunch of advice saying, hey, you should disable this prioritize faster shooting thing. And so I thought about it, and then I thought, you know what? I bet you somebody who's smarter than me about cameras has looked into this. And sure enough, Petapixel, which is a great blog, which I think might have gotten shut down and then maybe got unshut down. I'm trying to remember. Or maybe it was the DP camera people. They got shut down, and some of them went to Petapixel. I don't, whatever. The blog is still up, and they investigated this. And what they found was, just in case you heard this in the news, that if you have the prioritize faster shooting thing turned on, it really only affects anything if we're talking about you're hitting the shutter 5, 6, 7 times a second. No one does that. If you're going to do that, just do a burst shot, right? So, and even then, the degradation to the image quality is quite low. It's really just trading off speed for image quality a little bit, which is what it should do. But if you're a weirdo who's taking 8 stills per second, I guess you want that turned on, right? Otherwise you'll miss the shot. So now we know. I'll link to that. So I guess that's a debunk. Speaking of websites that are shutting down, is Giant Freaking Robot, which is not even that old of a site. I think it was 2019, their current incarnation. It's basically a clickbait site. Now, I'm sure that it's got fans. I'm sure that it's got Patreons. I'm sure it's got all sorts of people who are part of the GFR community. But most of what you would see from them are clickbaity titles and listicles and stuff. And I'm sure it's all great. It's what I mean to say in that is it's not highbrow entertainment. And it's not necessarily a breaking news site like a Deadline or something like that, in pop culture. But some of the stats that they shared recently about why they're shutting down are sort of incredible. So I'll just read this one little thing. Basically, the context is they're turning off the website or no longer contributing to the website. They're preemptively laying off their staff now before, they financially just can't make payroll anymore. And the creator will keep updating the YouTube from time to time because that platform still works for them financially. It says no one can find our site to read it, so that No one can find our site to read it, so that 20 million unique visitors that they'd previously been getting per month is now a few thousand a month. Nearly every independently owned entertainment news publisher is in the same situation in one way or another. And actually, Google had him out. I assume it's a him. Had them out, to visit on site and talk about independent publishing and how important independent publishers are to Google and all that. But basically, like, no, this is by design. This is what's happening. You know, you don't matter anymore because brands. And because it's not, you know, basically, I suspect what it is like, you know, like enough shitty content farms pissed in the well that it became a big enough problem, not for Google to index it, but that users have come to reject it. Because you just look at one of these now, it only takes so long. Even normal, non-technically literate people, like, they're not idiots. If they click a thing and they go to a thing and they get no valuable information from it, over time they will learn. And that valuable, look, when I say valuable, I mean like it's either what they wanted or something that they find stimulating. So like it could just be outrage bait, like we find on social media, right? Like that could be valuable. But like a lot of this listicle stuff where it just repeats the same sentence in 45 different ways to try to get you to scroll through some display ads. If that's what we're talking about here, like people are learning that they don't like that. And so anything that stinks of that even like has the same visual language as that, is probably performing a lot worse. And Google probably knows, is at the leading edge of knowing that, because every time you click a link on Google, you know, they know that you're clicking that link. It goes through a redirect that they own, right? And so I get why they would be rejiggering the search results here. And I get why that they have perverse incentives, because of course they'd rather favor people who are also sponsoring it. And they've continued to blur the line between what's a sponsor, you know, a paid ad search result, and what's a regular organic search result. But I want to share a brief, this all made me think of a brief anecdote. We had a guest lecturer at Calvin, my alma mater. This is probably in 2006. Late 2006, the big news about Google at the time was whether or not they were going to pull out of China. And a relatively senior guy at Google, he was gray-haired at the time, right? I imagine not a lot of people at Google were gray-haired then. He was working on a secret project that he made several winks and nods was, you know, a phone. Basically, I think he might have come in with the Danger acquisition with, what was his name? Andy Rubin. The Sidekick people. He gave a very interesting speech. And he said, he basically outlined a lot of Google's business and their philosophy. And it was kind of a pitch, hey, you should come apply to work at Google. And I actually did. He said, not only are we disinterested in maximizing revenue and profit, but when you do a Google search, and not only do we show that big gaudy yellow box that used to be so prominent that you were just seeing just these two sponsored results and it was at the top, it was way above the fold, there's still plenty of room underneath it, right? Like that's long gone. Now it's just, you barely see like a little like scintilla of baby blue ad next to advertisements. Of course, I don't see them because I use one blocker and it seems to block them all. He said that those search results happened in a totally different, much simpler, much less sophisticated pipeline where it would take so basically your keywords would get sent to two different servers. One service would give you the sponsored results and the other service would get you the real index of search results. And in the technical architecture, but also in the organizational infrastructure, it was like a separation of church and state. And there was like all of these fire breaks between the two that, from an ethical perspective, and a doing right by people perspective, and just enabling America, enabling the world to better, navigate information online. It was all very high-minded, and God bless my colleague or my classmates, I suppose. They just, when it opened up for Q&A, they just peppered him with questions like, how are you going to hold back when shareholders are like, wanting to maximize stuff? Like right now that you're IPO'd, like people are going to want more, right? Or like, what are you going to do about Hong Kong, right? Like, and China. And this poor guy who's not a PR guy, he did his very best. But I just think about that now because we are so far afield from where we were then. Google. With the election result, I had almost forgotten that Google had just been ordered to possibly break up. I wonder where that's going to go. Apple have come into an agreement to purchase Pixelmator, the makers of Pixelmator and Photomator. I don't know if they got any other maters, but Pixelmator is like Photoshop, and Photomator is like Lightroom. There you go. I've been using Pixelmator since the day it literally came out. I'd previously been using Acorn, which is another Mac image editor. Pixelmator feels like it was made by Apple. Long story short, if there was an Apple-made Photoshop, it would be that one. They do a great job of using the best of AppKit, Apple paradigms for all of the UI controls, to the extent that they can. Like at some point they switched the eyedropper from the native color picker, which doesn't respect certain color space configurations correctly, to their own color picker, which means now you can only pick colors from inside of the window, which sucks. But like beyond little things like that, and they use a dark theme, just like Apple's old, I guess all long-standing Apple's Pro apps use dark themes, similar to how Aperture did, which is now discontinued. I like Pixelmator. I like it fine. I think I just don't like to have to use a Photoshop-like tool to manually edit images because it's tedious. But when I have to, I use Pixelmator. They were very early to having a bunch of ML enhanced features, and all their ML shit is clearly built on top of Apple's stack. So that's impressive. That's cool. And good for them to get purchased. Their Photomator app, it's like $70 a year. It's only subscription model, and so no, it's not 70. It costs money per year, and I was too cheap to buy the lifetime. So I trialed it, and it was fine. What I want out of a Lightroom style app is iCloud Photos integration, so I don't have two libraries, and it checks that box. It does do that. But I also want really, really good just like AI button. Click the AI button, make it better. And I started a Photomator trial, incidentally, last week. And I went through the last 45 raw pictures I took, and I just said, auto enhance all these. And they were super duper, the color was all fucked, and they were so washed out, and the highlights were overblown, that actually the Apple Photos apps auto enhance looked a lot better to my eyes in every single case. So, well, I don't need to add, another tool here. I'm sure it would give you more manual control, and maybe if I knew what all the sliders did, I'd want that. I'm really curious to see what Apple does here, right? Is this going to be more like when they bought Workflow and then they squirreled away and 18 months later it came out as shortcuts? Is this going to be just an acqui-hire for more talent to work in pro workflow stuff? Will Apple just take Pixelmator and rebrand it as like Photos Pro, right? I'm curious. I hope that the app, the Pixelmator app continues in some way, because it's a space where if you're not using Photoshop, it's competitive, right? Like you got Affinity, you've got, I guess, Acorn. I don't feel like Acorn's a big deal anymore, but maybe I'm wrong. But Adobe, as they continue to go towards not only subscription but having sort of their own AI ecosystem and wanting you to have all of your shit sort of stored in their repositories, and as Apple is doing the same, you're seeing what used to be very tight relationships between Apple and Adobe, where Apple really fundamentally enabled Adobe's business through its embrace of PostScript and the original LaserWriter, and vice versa in terms of Adobe giving Apple probably the first, blockbuster piece of software for the platform in the form of Photoshop. Those two were so married at the hip because they offered complementary services and solutions. And now they are competing increasingly. So I could see strategically it just making sense for Apple to have a good one of those. If photos are so important to Apple, having a way to edit those photos at a pixel peeping level, as opposed to just a general broad strokes adjustments and cleanup level, So anyway, that's news. Speaking back to entertainment news, though, Mass Effect, which is a video game, the first one was very good. The second one was one of the best games of all time. The third one was bad, with a bad game, bad ending. One of the biggest disappointing letdowns in gaming history, probably, from a market perspective. People were pissed. But then the fourth game was somehow irrelevant. So bad as to be kind of forgotten pretty quickly. And Amazon has greenlit a show. I'll talk about it later, but this is the third major show that is a video game adaptation that Amazon is developing for Prime Video. The first one was, of course, Fallout, which might be the best, first season of television I've seen this year. Probably is. The second one, which I'm working through now, is Like a Dragon Yakuza, based on the Yakuza or Like a Dragon series, which Sega is rebranding as if you've ever heard of it. In Japan, for the entire run of that series, the title of the games were Ryuga Gotoku, or Way of the Dragon. And here they were just called Yakuza because it was a gritty crime thing. And of course, Yakuza is it's a not a swear word, but it's a rough and tumble word just to say in polite company. So they would never call the game Yakuza back in Japan. And they're just trying to sync, I think, the branding, right? And they've been doing that with the games as well. So that's why the show is called Like a Dragon: Yakuza, because they don't want people to forget that this is what the franchise is. And I've heard that despite good reviews, viewership of this new Yakuza show is not great. So I'll talk about that later. But I think it is very good. This Mass Effect show, based on how I feel about Fallout and Yakuza, I'm super excited. Amazon should just own the market of video game adaptations, because apart from Last of Us, they're just nailed. How weird is it that here we are in the mid 2020s and video game adaptations are actually good by default? The Mario movie was a massive success. Even the Sonic movie did well. Ugh. You may not have heard this, but the voice of the You've Got Mail guy, he passed away. His name was Elwood Edwards. He worked for many years at a local news station, WKYC. So I'll share that article. I just thought to share that because, of course, in my jingle for the mailbag section of the show, we have, I think, his voice remixed or sampled. So, Elwood, you will live on as long as I'm breaking changes. Another news item, Microsoft, in its unquenchable thirst to make everything AI now, has updated Notepad.exe. You, if you've ever used Windows, you might remember Notepad.exe as being basically the simplest app that can exist. It was a window, and you could type things into it, and you could save and you could open, and I think that was it. At some point, they added like bold and rich text formatting. I think. Maybe not even. Possibly not even. It was a simple app, and it was it was a great example of an app that just never got an update. It was the same in Windows, basically 3.1 to 95. And then from 95 through XP didn't change at all. On to today, it's still there, it's buried, but that doesn't change. Well, in Windows 11, Microsoft's been updating a lot of these older apps, bringing them up to at least mid 2000s. And the story here isn't just that Notepad exe is like now actively maintained, which I think was a funny, thing to throw in a headline. Notepad exe, now an actively maintained app, has gotten its inevitable AI update, is Ars Technica's headline. Basically, it's got the little AI sauce that you can sprinkle on. Because we sprinkle sauces in this family. In this household, we sprinkle our sauces. And it got me thinking, like, I've got a Windows 11 gaming PC, and I've got an Office 365 subscription and Game Pass, and I've got the subscriptions. I just don't use Windows very much, other than just to launch games. And so I started clicking around, looking for all the AI and the Copilot bits around my Windows 11 machine. And what I found was like, it almost seems like every department was told, go and put some AI sauce on everything because we are an AI company now, and this is like our strategic direction. And that's fine. But then, in typical departmental Microsoft-y fashion, none of those teams ever talk to each other. And so other than the logo being the same and probably having some sort of like internal design system that like you have to follow in terms of iconography and visual presentation, it sure does seem like there aren't a lot of like meaningful shared services that the software is leveraging. It seems like a lot of them are just making underlying API calls to probably, OpenAI and other models, LLMs. Because this app here, like the screenshot shows an AI popover window UI control that I haven't seen anywhere else in Windows yet. And just like, why make all this a one-off? So if you're playing with Apple's, Apple intelligence shit, this is an opportunity to appreciate the fact that like it is a system-wide service, and it is the same, like no matter what text you select and no matter what app you're in, all of those AI writing tools are going to be exactly the same and familiar and usable, basically system-wide. And this has always been, I think, a distinction in terms of how Apple approaches shared services and where the operating system stops and custom applications start. That line has always been deeper for Apple than it has been for Microsoft with Windows, where with Windows, it's just like, this is a kernel and a windowing thing. And then after that, once you're in your window, fuck you, you're on your own. And with Apple, it's just a much deeper set of interactions that you get, quote unquote, for free. It just makes it harder to do anything that bucks those trends, because then, now you're really, quote unquote, off the reservation and have to build your own. So as a user, though, you give people tools, copy paste UI always looks the same. Text selection has all these different kind of like things over the top of it. And now AI is just one more of those. So I think that despite Microsoft's stronger embrace for AI financially and strategically, Apple actually has the easier lift here to get it in more people's hands in a way that they're going to actually use it. But on that note, AI is doomed. Next item. A fellow named Gary Marcus, he's been considered an AI doomer for a couple of years because in 2022, which was about 30 years ago, he had the temerity to say that if you keep on spending, let's say, more money on GPUs and LLM and more data at LLM training, you will reach a point of diminishing returns where you have to spend obscene amounts of money for just marginal improvements to these large language models. And I think whenever people hear diminishing returns, they mean failure, or like, I think he said, the title of this post originally was "Deep Learning is Hitting a Wall." So as I guess walls, when you hit a wall, you don't go further. That's the end of the road, is the wall. But like, he had Elon picking on him personally, Sam Altman debunking it, indirectly. He probably had a really fun week. Probably got a lot of attention on Hacker News. It seems kind of like that first story, though, 2 years ago was pretty obvious. Like, that's how every other curve in technology has gone. There's a big breakthrough, and then there's like a rapid period of like, oh, wow, this year's processor's twice as fast or 3 times as fast as last year, because there's just obvious efficiencies that you can gain. And of course, why would this be any different? That beyond a certain point, it's like, okay, we can't just like turn up the dial to 11 and make numbers go up forever. We got to think about new architectures. We got to think about how can we do this smarter and make better use of the, raw horsepower that we have to keep on making things better. So he wrote a follow-up here with some kind of, he's taking a victory lap, but just more evidence that things really are hitting a wall. And proving himself right. It's interesting to think about right now, because this is the first time that I have felt that way myself as a everyday user of GPT-4o. I haven't used Anthropic and Claude very much. I've used a bunch of other apps that whatever, but most of the time I reach for ChatGPT. I have GPT Plus, and I like to, again, like similar with the image playgrounds, I like to test the fences, and I'll ask it stuff to Becky and I share an account, so sometimes she'll see something pop up in the sidebar that's like, why is he asking about this? And the answer, just between you and me, is I've got a lot of dark secrets. But what I tell her is like, no, I really want to know, where's this thing going to tell me no? You ask about certain intellectual property and be like, oh, I can't go there, right? If you ask about, certain political things, it'll say, hey, I'm not an expert, right? Or health things, sometimes it'll say, hey, like CDC, whatever, right? So they got some guardrails put in. Cultural sensitivity is another one, especially because I'm constantly talking about languages and cultural differences with, us and Asia, or like how I should be in a particular case or whatever it is. So I run into those boundaries maybe more often than other people. And when you are curious, like I am, and you're trying to run into those boundaries just to figure out where they are, because it doesn't announce to you what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, I have found an increasing number of categories, not just like specific tasks that LLMs are bad at, but categories of thought is the wrong word. Like, for example, if you ask an LLM to be irreverent, I'm talking about this, or here's a list of 4 topics, or here's like a blog post that I started writing. If you tell it, even though they theoretically they've got a spiciness level internally, that the heat is often how it's referred to, or temperature, you turn that up and it becomes more random. The staccatic, like the Plinko ball drops faster in its head, and it'll choose little slightly more far out probabilistic tokens for how to respond to you, which usually takes the shape of wilder and wackier replies. It's probably a function of the fact that they have to really, really sand down the edges to make this thing safe to use for normal human consumption. But whenever I ask it to come up with a creative idea, hey, here's 4 things like this, give me something that's just like way wacky, something way out there that has nothing to do with these 4 things. It the way LLMs seem to work is it gets so anchored on what text you've given it that it really can't break out. And what I found is that like often the best way to get a good result is to give it so little prompting. Just put it in a direction and then I'll cherry pick stuff out, right? But like the more that you give it, the less that it is able to riff and branch out. And I use this shit enough, and I'm always on the latest models. Like I was an O1 preview yesterday, which is like their best thing. And I'm starting to realize I think this is just a category error that LLMs might be just incapable of creating something out of nothing, basically. Like they like if I'm talking about something and I say, give me something just totally from left field, it will just give you the most blasé thing. Like I said, hey, come up with an idea for a story, like a novel to write, like in a given context. And it first for 3 responses wouldn't do anything useful. And then it was like, he could do a story about, oh yeah, here's the example, right? So Shinkai Makoto, my favorite Japanese animated director dude, he's expected to be doing a new movie probably next year. And the only thing that anyone knows about it is it's going to be totally unlike his past movies. So I ask it, it's like, all right, well, speculate for me. If it's going to be totally unlike his last movies, what do you think it's going to be about? And then it's like, well, his last 3 movies are about this, so it's probably going to be like this. It's like, no, go way out, bud. Like, give me a movie that is maybe thematically totally different from, but still, would reflect his taste and sensibilities as a director. And it was excruciating watching this thing try to come up with something. Eventually it was like, well, it could be set in the future and it could be about an AI person who has all the same problems. And I was like, oh man, you guys are... There's a long-winded way to say, if LLMs are indeed hitting a wall and we're spending a lot of energy, and NVIDIA's, I think they made like, what, $12 or $16 billion in pure profit last quarter. There's a lot riding on LLMs not hitting a wall financially, in terms of the markets. Like there's OpenAI taking itself private. Apparently, a lot of that hinges on agreements about when they hit AGI or when they hit certain benchmarks, or investors will pull out, or OpenAI will be forced to make people whole, basically. I wouldn't trust them to tell me, hey, this counts as AGI, right? Or here's what the limits are on this. But I'm starting, for the first time, I'm starting to feel it myself. Like, I think that this might just, the set of things LLMs are good at is this rectangle, and we're getting a clearer and clearer view of what that rectangle is as they get better. But everything outside of this particular rectangle, these categories of use, it is functionally useless. And you can't get to artificial general intelligence down a path that just has these no-go avenues, especially when they're as profound as creative thought, right? So that's something that I've been thinking about a bit. O1 Preview is a very cool tool, but like it's a trick. It seems to be very similar to their current model. It just spends way more time, and it's self-auditing. It goes through like 15 rounds. It's got the little cute animated like reticulating splines, thinking about the trade-offs, whatever. And I've asked it a couple of questions. It spent over 2.5 minutes on one the other day before getting me a mediocre to good response, right? I had to analyze my ACA healthcare plans and help me understand the trade-offs and some of the tax implications. Like, that was very good for that, right? Last news item. There's a scientist who, in some ways, is in hot water, and in other ways is cancer-free. And she is probably more concerned about the cancer-free part. So she had a relapse of cancer, breast cancer, and her name is Beta Halisi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. In 2020, she discovered she had a recurrence of breast cancer, and she didn't want to go through chemo again. This is a Nature.com article. And so she used oncolytic virotherapy to treat her own stage 3 cancer. So basically injected a virus, designed virus, into herself to attack cancer cells. So experimented on herself. It killed the cancer, apparently. And she's been cancer-free for 4 years. And now there's an article about it. And some scientists are getting mad because there's like a long history of, hey, maybe don't experiment on yourself. And then some scientists saying, hey, y'all are too slow. So I'm going to do it. And then they do it to great success. And everyone's like, that was unethical, but also cool. So we're gonna all start doing that now, but you're still in timeout. All right, Mr. Scientist? Or Mrs. Scientist? Or Ms. Scientist? Or Mix Scientist? Whatever the fuck. Like, you're in timeout. Whatever salutation I should use with you. But good for her, right? Like, fuck. If I had cancer and I didn't want to get chemo again, I'd already had it and it was terrible. Like, and I knew how to program viruses. Shoot up. Have fun. So this episode is dedicated to injecting viruses into yourself when you're qualified to know what that's going to do. And that's it for the news. Well, let's see. What do I have to recommend to y'all? Still playing Call of Duty Black Ops 6. It's a big dumb blockbuster, and that's nice. Sometimes it's nice just to play something mainstream, so I can feel like one of the cool kids. I've actually gotten better at it. Playing in multiplayer, I am my KD ratio, if you know, you know, is above 1 most of the time. So it's as long as I'm treading water. It forgets my VSync settings every fucking time that I launch the game. So if you play computer games, VSync is a feature where the graphics card will like make sure that you are getting a full frame of content delivered on every single frame. Because what can happen is like half of the video's buffer of what pixels to send might be ready for the next frame, but the other half aren't. And so it'll send like whatever's in that frame buffer. And it can result in what's called screen tearing, where maybe the left half of the screen is 1 frame ahead of the right half of the screen, which can be really jarring, especially if things are moving quickly. And so screen tearing is really, really bad when you've got a slow refresh rate or a latent connection or whatever. And because I'm gaming on a 4K ultra short throw projector that achieves 4K via a checkerboarding-like effect, screen tearing is just absolutely really, really bad. And there's a bug in Call of Duty where it forgets my settings every time I launch the game. And so every time I start playing the game, I get like kind of nauseous, but I'm in like a multiplayer mode and I can't just pause or I'll get all shot to smithereens. I'll get shot to smithereens if I pause to turn VSync back on. And so every time I sit down to play, it all starts with me starting a game, getting, frustrated with all the screen tearing, remembering that I have to go turn on VSync, and then doing it, and then getting killed 3 times. So the fact my kill death ratio is still above 1.0, in spite of that, not bad. Another thing I had to do to try to make the game work better, my goddamn, I have a 3090, which is a very, very fast, powerful, previous generation graphics card. And I have what I like to think is pretty good cooling, not water cooling, but pretty good cooling. Like I've got a lot of fans in my case. I don't know a lot about how to cool computers properly, but like this card is 3 slots. It weighs a ton. It is a very heavy, big thing. And when its fan is going, I can hear it in the other room because I play over a HDMI base T, like Ethernet to HDMI dongle. So like the computer is literally 35 feet away from me when I'm playing, and it's still too loud. And that's not good, you know. So I'm gonna share the YouTube of this tutorial for what is called undervolting. So it's, you've heard of overclocking. Well, if you want to make your shit go slower, you can undervolt it. Now, technically, you can actually improve the performance of a graphics card by undervolting it, because counterintuitively, if you adjust the curve of how much power it's getting at different temperature levels, the fans might spin up less, or it might spend less time getting hot in the first place, and so you might actually eke out a little bit more marginal performance, even if the clock rate, the actual literal number of megahertz that you're running at, even if that goes down, because it won't be producing as much heat. And so what the thermal trade-off might be on a different curve than whatever comes out of the factory. So I followed this finally after years of meaning to get around to it, undervolted the 3090, and as far as I can tell, I have not heard it make a peep since then. And I was, in the game, and it was like a significant, like 10 degrees or more Celsius colder the chip was than it usually is at peak. And as far as I can tell, it's still locked 60 frames per second. So I'm pretty happy, actually. So if you've got a noisy GPU in the family, consider undervolting it. For TV, Rebecca and I have been watching Mad Men. We moved from the Star Trek utopia of Strange New Worlds to the Mad Men dystopia of the late 1950s, early 60s. It's nice to be reminded of a time when America was more regressive. Hopefully not a preview of coming attractions. But to have broader context that, what's that phrase, that saying, the expression, was it Bill Gates who it's often attributed to, that we tend to overestimate how much is going to change in 1 year, and we underestimate how much will change in 10. Yeah, I think about that a lot. Another show that's on, this is I think it's going to be a Justin show. I don't think Becky's going to have an interest in this. It's the one I'd mentioned earlier, Like a Dragon Yakuza. And I mentioned it. So the Yakuza video game series is an over-the-top game. You play the criminal, right? Like, and you're in their version of Kabukicho and their version of Shinjuku. And it takes place in other areas. Actually, the newest games are in Hawaii, which I haven't tried myself yet. I've tried Hawaii. I went to Maui once. It was fine. But in the classic Yakuza games, you are in a Kabukicho equivalent neighborhood, and you are a gangster, and you are rising through gangster ranks, or you're fighting turf wars, or whatever it is. It is typified by being really, really over the top in its violence, in its cultural commentary, as the years have gone on, the team that makes it, they've been happy to, I think, improvise and flex their muscles. Like the newest game that's coming out now is like literally a pirate game. You're like a pirate Yakuza at sea. It's all nonsense. And so the way that they translated it to television was to retcon a lot of or to combine other kind of like story arcs that we've seen over this. The first game was on the PS2. 20 years of games over 20 years. And they've kind of composited together different stories from the games into what from just a prestige television perspective makes for a much better story. It's like you got these 4 kids and they're all at this orphanage and they're being raised by a dude who clearly used to be Yakuza. And they get in trouble and now they all now we have because the game, there's just the one protagonist. It's just you, and you're following a camera 3 feet behind him for the next 200 hours as you play each of these obnoxiously long games full of all these mini games. That just doesn't translate to TV, and so now you got 4 characters and these interweaving A plots and B plots in this drama. So it makes a lot more sense in that sense. I'm sure some number of fans are pissed that it's not literally just the game, but in a TV show. But I find the story to be compelling. It's clearly a show that's produced in Japan with Japanese cast and crew. I hate to say it. By default, when you launch this thing with Amazon Prime Video, it will use your localized language for audio dubbing. The audio dub, whoever the voice actors are, I'm sure that they did their very best. I don't think that I've ever heard an English dub of a Japanese show that's this bad. It is comically bad. It is unlistenably bad. It was on for like 15 seconds, and I normally I would listen in the original Japanese as a weeb. I would play it in Japanese, and ideally I'd play with Japanese subtitles, except for the thing about gangsters is that they don't use proper grammar and they shorten the fuck out of every single possible contraction that they can. And so they use very rude speech, very short and abbreviated speech, very often you'll just see like a very compressed series of like 3 syllables that would normally be 15. Or with the Chinese characters supporting like your comprehension as you go, it's just like vocalizations at best. And so I even with subtitles, I probably wouldn't be able to follow it. So I'm doing English subs and Japanese original dubs. The English dubbing is so bad that I wonder whether or not the critics watching this are probably playing it in the original audio and English subtitles. And the fans, well, not fans, but like the general populace playing it is probably just default settings and listening to it in English. And, that's fine for what it is. That's how people are. If you have a show like Shogun on Hulu FX or whatever, that was, I don't know if they did a dub for it. It was clear that like, maybe they did, and this is all irrelevant, but sometimes like dubs aren't available, and intentionally so. Like, this is a subtitle show, you watch and you have to read, and there's always the running joke that like Americans can't be sussed to care about other cultures enough to even read subtitles. I wonder though, like, if prioritizing the dubbing isn't going to tank this show, because if the dubbing is bad, and it sure seems bad, and user reviews are bad and viewership is bad, and the dubbing is on by default, it would probably be wrong for Amazon to blame the production or whatever. So anyway, what a shame if that's the case, because I think it's a really good show. I think it's done really, really well. If anything, Amazon should reconsider dubbing at all, or dubbing poorly, or having dubbing be a default, or making their goddamn video player so just shitty in every single platform. I really wish more of these Apple TV apps just use the built-in Apple TV video player that actually worked. But, we can't have nice things. So check it out, Like a Dragon Yakuza on Amazon Prime Video. I think it is good. Do not use the English dubs. Another recommendation. I'm loving this thing. I got a Galileo G8 for $70. It is one of those shell controller things. The Backbone One was the first to kind of break out this product category where you put your phone between the two sides of a traditional video game controller and you just jack it in there. It's got a USB-C on the right, and the USB-C actually articulates, so you can kind of like twist it up so you don't have to like, necessarily like jam the phone in sideways. There's a little bit of movement over there. There's pass-through charging. There's a headphone port if you're into that sort of thing. It's a big, beefy controller. It feels like a modern Xbox or PlayStation 2, PS5 controller. Nice big, R1, R2 buttons. It's got Hall effect analog sticks, which like not even any of the modern consoles, as far as I know, are true Hall effect joysticks, meaning that they don't drift, and you can recalibrate them with time. It's got even those like a configurable rear buttons in the back, so you can like you can bind those to different buttons, so you're not bouncing to the ABXY quite so much. It's impressive. It has a Super Nintendo kind of color scheme. The only thing I'd change about it is the D-pad is too clicky. So I probably wouldn't be able to get away with using it in bed next to Becky because it would just drive her nuts. But the buttons themselves are quiet. So I guess in theory you could if you were just playing with the analog sticks. Now, of course, like the problem is there's still no games on phones unless you want to play like the mobile version of PUBG or Call of Duty. Maybe with changes in the administration, we're going to see winners and losers from a technical regulation perspective. So whatever I've been thinking about with the EU and the DMA and the nonsensical regulation that Apple is under there, who knows? Maybe we will see side loading in Fortnite on phones. God knows that a lot of the investment class and the pro crypto people would love to see Apple forced to allow all of their crypto scam apps onto every iPhone. So maybe that'll open the door a little bit, but the big picture is there's just not a lot of games. You can have cloud streaming, right? So there's still currently Safari based. So a lot of people use these for NVIDIA GeForce Now or for Xbox cloud gaming. But now that we have officially blessed game emulators, RetroArch being the best one. I know a lot of people use Delta because that came out first, but if you're willing to put up with configuring RetroArch, it's just so much better. So I've got RetroArch set up, and I've got some of my favorite kind of curated ROMs, and that's my primary plan for entertainment because we're going to be in Japan for a bit, and I'm not bringing a computer, I'm not bringing an iPad, I'm bringing a Kindle, a camera, a phone, and this controller shell. That's my plan. So I'm traveling pretty light this time, and I'm trying to think of it. If you got a recommendation, by the way, of a game that I should sink my teeth into, I'm looking for kind of deep cuts of any sort of classic Super Nintendo, Nintendo, Genesis, that kind of era, ideally. I think that this thing can play pretty much everything up to PS1, PSP. I'm not sure the list of what RetroArch supports on the iOS platform is obviously a subset of the full thing. But if you got any recommendations, I'd love a game that was like a little bit longer and I could sink my teeth into, like a role-playing game or an action game with a story. Podcast at Searles.co is where you would tell me about that, and then maybe I'd talk about it. Cool product. Don't buy, if you go to Amazon, you'll see the Galileo G8 next to the Galileo G8 Plus. Don't buy the second one. The Plus is actually like all wireless and you have to charge it. It's a totally different product, and it's probably not the one that you want because that's way more complexity than I want to bargain for. I just want a stupid shell that I can throw in a bag and not worry about too much. I'm otherwise out of things to recommend. I recommend learning a second language and having a country that you like to run off to when needed. But now it's time to hear what you think.
You've got mail.
Thanks, Elwood, for leading me in there. Matt writes in, if you own a Jeep and you see another Jeep parked in the wild, you put a duck on it as a way of saying, hey, I also own a Jeep. Basically, pieces of flair or those Disney pins that people trade and collect. Thanks, Matt. You were the first of 8 people to contact me and tell me all about Jeep culture. That's cute. You know, it explains why all these Jeeps have these ducks on them. When I think of underrepresented groups in society that are marginalized, I definitely think of Jeep owners. So that this is their form of solidarity, making themselves seen. I think in some part of the very back of recesses of my head, I knew this already, but I don't like it. But thanks anyway for writing that in. Next up, we got Ariel. Ariel writes in, says, I'm listening to version 22, and your comment about recording audio memories makes a lot of sense to me. A few years ago, I used to walk around the city with a small recorder just capturing these soundscapes for my own enjoyment. And actually, while I was hearing you talk, it occurred to me how crazy or awesome would it be to create some sort of Instagram, but for sound experiences. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Totally useless. Like, you just scroll down and in your feed, you hear Hiroshi grocery shopping in Tokyo, and Dieter walking by the street in Berlin, and Tiago next to some kids playing soccer on a beach in Rio. It might be a great idea or a totally stupid one. You decide. Ariel, thanks for that one. I hadn't thought of it as an app that people could contribute to, but it's actually like, that's exactly what it would need to be for this to take off. So I'd mentioned I spent some time fighting with Logic to actually process the binaural audio. And all of the steps you have to go through, you basically have to Dolby master it, and then pick a profile that's like Apple Spatial Audio, and you get that going, and then you finally get out the other end, and you're like, this is still very weird for listening to spoken voice, so I'm not going to do that. But even if I just published the soundscapes, which I now feel confident I'd be able to figure out with half a day of effort to have be good enough, people don't go to podcast players for that necessarily. Maybe I should start a Spotify and just publish them to Spotify and see if I can get some people just to play them like white noise. But it does seem like the sort of thing that would benefit greatly from having an app that could just listen to your phone and record it and do whatever processing needed to make the background audio sound nice, right? Because it's out of the box. You're competing now. Like, if you're trying to like hear that sort of stuff off in the background, like the children playing, unless they're right near the mic, what you're going to mostly hear is like wind, right? So some amount of EQ at the very least to try to get to pop the things that you want to hear and suppress the things you don't want to hear is necessary. And it's a very different profile than what you'd want for just about any other kind of audio production, I would imagine. Now, I'm not an audio engineer, but that's just my guess. So an app that was focused on taking in kind of people's garbage microphone input and then treating it in a same or consistent way, maybe even applying, taking the Instagram analogy further, maybe even applying the equivalent of filters to treat the audio in to kind of give it some mood and texture. I think that's a great idea, And of course, scrolling a feed might not make the most sense from a UI perspective, since it's an auditory medium and you'd probably just set it and forget it for a little while. But having a sort of a radio kind of app design, and different people that you follow, or God, yeah, like, I mean, you mentioned people by name. If these are friends of yours and you can kind of like hear where they are or how it sounds where they are, I think that's lovely. So somebody go please build that. Thanks for writing in. Jason writes, subject, photo wallpaper. Thank you for your recent reference to photo wallpaper. I think Jason's referring to the photo shuffle feature in the lock screen on iPhone and iPad. One of the driving reasons for moving off Google Photos was tighter integration with the rest of Apple's features, HomeKit identification, wallpapers, etc. After spending so much time migrating, I'm still organizing. I had forgotten the wallpaper feature, even though that was partially what incentivized me to move. And your last podcast reference to it was the reminder I needed to set it up. I did, and have since had so many smile moments for the past few days with kids' pictures on my phone and iPad. So thank you. You get credit for making those smiles happen. Well, first of all, go set up Photo Shuffle if you haven't. If you're listening to this and you've been lazy. If there are people in your life that you love to see, do it. It's just delightful. Even if you just want to see pictures of yourself. Or whatever. My rotation is I've got Jeremy, Becky, and Aaron. I don't think myself. Maybe also myself. As being the people who photo shuffle in my watch and my phone. But I also have cities and nature turned on. And it's a delight. It's really great. The idea that Jason would give me credit for his smiles for a feature that I had no part in building. In fact, I just spent time complaining for 2 to 3 years about it. It reminds me of a bit of research about 15, 20 years ago that I read that referential humor is so powerful that, like, referencing a joke or quoting a funny line from a movie, if let's say that there's a movie you and I both watched and it's funny, or a TV show, like, I think You Should Leave is kind of designed to be this, where it's sort of almost cringe humor that's hard to watch the first time, but then has all of these one-liners or these affectations that when two people have seen it and one person makes a callback reference by quoting a line to the other person, our brains are wired to actually attribute the funniness to the person making the reference, as opposed to the person who initially thought of the joke or did the work. So yes, Tim Robinson is the guy in the TV show being funny, but me, when I say, you know, like some nonsense that he says, or talk about how Steve doesn't think this shirt is complicated, and I make, you know, my brother laugh, my brother's brain is thinking, oh, Justin's being funny right now, but really I'm being lazy right now because I'm just referencing somebody else's joke. But so that, for that reason, Jason, I'm uncomfortable taking credit for those smiles, but I do appreciate the sentiment. Okay, my throat is getting to the point where it wants to not be doing this anymore. It turns out that when you get up at 3 a.m, maybe this is actually harder on my voice. Eric writes in, regarding the fitness app you created for your wife's business, what are the top two or three things you did right, and the top 2 or 3 things you wish you could have done differently? This is a good one. Number one most important thing that I did right was I successfully resisted the urge to give her the answer to the obvious questions. So there's a bunch of questions at the front end of any application. what does it do? All sorts of product stuff. And I had a pretty good idea where we'd land. And I forced a lot of the struggle and the pain of asking her, okay, so like, draw this out for me. I want you to start from zero and explain what you want. Literally on a napkin, draw what you think this should look like. Or explain to me, like, what's the number one thing that people do when they go to this thing? What's the number two thing that they do? When they're in it, why do they go to the thing? When they're done, how do they feel? What do they see? Getting those sort of impressions and those reactions out of Becky so that they were coming in her voice and her thoughts. It was excruciating for both of us because she wasn't used to doing this and she was uncomfortable. And she knew I had experience, and so she, hesitate before saying anything because she didn't want to get criticized or critiqued or drawing any UI. She, oh, well, this better than me or whatnot. It's like, no, this really needs to be like, yes, I could, because I could have just gone and I could have just said, hey, this is how it's going to be, or hey, here's a 70% best effort, like probably what you want. Where I kind of build the house and then she can figure out like what kind of curtains and drapes to put up around the windows. And I think a lot of apps get developed that way, and it's just lazy. And what you end up with is, here's a mediocre fitness app that is what a programmer thinks somebody wants based on what I know as the programmer. And then I leave just sort of the trimmings and the tweaks and the finishing touches to the subject matter expert. But because I listened to Becky and forced the conversation of like what she really cares about, you'll find that this app is like radically different than any other fitness app. And it is an expression of her ideology and her practice as a trainer. So, take Tonal, for example, is the other one I use. Peloton's the same thing. Apple Fitness Plus is the same thing. Your strength training workouts are all organized by body area that they target. Upper body workouts, lower body workouts, full body workouts, some core stuff, some maybe like other kind of categories, yoga, cardio, whatever. It never came up, right? Because I talked to Becky about how she did it, that just wasn't a thing. If I just built something, it would have had like, oh, and here's the metadata for what kind of like area of the body the workout targets, right? And like maybe there'd be other sort of design considerations for those different workout types. Well, it turns out that like part of Becky's practice is every single workout is a full body workout, and every single workout focuses on these major compound movements. Every single one is going to have a hinge. Every single one's going to have a squat. Every single one's going to have a push. Every single one's going to have a pull. And there's different ways you can mix and match those things. But at the end of the day, like that's all you need. And it's that simple but hard advice that's like, yeah, it's not particularly exciting compared to having a whole but like from Tonal's perspective, right? Or Peloton or Apple's perspective, they need to have a huge fucking library of an infinite scroll of content because their incentive is to get you to subscribe. And they want to have a library that looks like a streaming video library, right? Of like, oh, there's an infinite number of workouts for you to try. But like from a actual practice perspective, that maybe isn't what people need, which is why Becky's got a model where every 5 weeks you get these 3 workouts and then you do them in a progressive overload format. And so the way you do those workouts is what changes, not the workouts themselves. And that became, that was clear from day one of actually talking to her. And so something that the app does that other apps don't do is every time you go to that workout, each of the subsequent 4 times, it will tell you to increase your weights, or it'll add an extra set, or in the very first week that you do any of the workouts, it actually reduces a set for each of the exercises, for each of the major blocks. That's just something you don't see anywhere else. And it was so baked into how Becky programs that she she didn't even know she had to tell me that stuff, right? And that was very valuable. Another thing that went really well is I'm glad I talk about this in the video that I shared of the talk, the conference talk I did. I'm really glad that I ferreted out all of the risk in other side projects first, so that I wasn't learning on the job how to do something like store all of these videos and give things like, upload progress bars and figure out where to put the data, right? Like if I'd done something naive and like stored the data in the file system on the server without like some abstraction to help me. And then I waited until we hit a wall where I realized, oh shoot, she's going to have 5 gigabytes of shit and I can only fit 1 on this type of server. Like, what am I going to do? I didn't want to ever be stuck in the position where I basically already have legacy code problems and I haven't even launched yet. And so I'm separately very glad that I thought through the architecture and I did the sort of like the volumetric planning for like, what is our usage expectation? I want it so that this only becomes expensive to operate when revenue is up an order of magnitude higher than that, right? To make those two things scale in a direction where it is actually not a problem when your operation costs go up because it means you're also becoming fantastically wealthy. That's math that you can do at the outset of any well-planned software project that no one takes the fucking time to do, especially not in the era of taking venture money, because then it's just growth at all costs without having any concern about tomorrow. And so by thinking through that side of things, like this thing just absolutely sips data up and down the stretch. And all of the things that were question marks, I would do little spikes or little research projects, and I would ferret those problems out early so that by the time I was actually building the app for real, I wasn't, solving 2 problems at once. One problem being build the thing, and number 2 being like figure out how to do the thing. 2 things I wish could have done differently. One thing that I did poorly is for the first several months, I didn't want to be overly pushy about establishing a cadence of, hey, every week we are doing iterations, and every Monday we are doing a planning, and every Friday we're going to do a demo, or any of the sort of like traditionally like agile stuff, because I personally don't like having too heavy-handed of a project management motif around things. I like to just sort of share things as they're ready to be shared and solicit feedback as needed. But what I found was that for Becky, the lack of structure, like if unless I was initiating a conversation about what work I was doing, in Becky's head, she was often like wondering, what the fuck is he doing? Unsure about where is my time going? How are things going? Where am I in the backlog? Just the sort of basic status stuff that and I should have known better. Because I wasn't broadcasting it, she didn't know. And even though I would share my progress and I would try my best to articulate like kind of where I was, I had my own to-do list, right? Like I had my own list I was working from, and I was making diligent progress, and I was doing my level best to ship stuff into production and show it to her. But she didn't have the experience or the context to see how does where we are today map to the conclusion point. And she didn't necessarily have the all of the information that I was working with in terms of what are the steps that remain. And I could have done a way better job way earlier in the process of exposing her to that stuff. And so at some point, I think in July, we broke out of my individual to-do tracker and used a GitHub project to actually like list off the backlog. Here's everything that's working. Here's everything that is a maybe. and here's what's in progress, and here's, sort of your swim lane for approving stuff before we call it finished. That was a mistake. That it took me so long to do that was a mistake, because I realized that we probably lost a few weeks in terms of productivity overall, because there was a little bit of rework that came to a head, and that's why we did it. But more importantly, I think her experience would have been a lot better, and I would have served her better had I brought her into some, like, a slightly more structured, information rich way to work through the problem of understanding progress. Even though I was the one building all of it, her lack of context on that often led to decisions or inclinations that were not sufficiently informed. So yeah, I regret that. Trying to think of another thing that didn't go great. The fact it all went really well is good. It took so much longer than I expected. Everything always does. And I don't know if it's got to be a me thing. It's a combination of, I'm unwilling to ship shit. I take frequent breaks to go and blog about a thing. So if something's like really interesting or something goes really, really well, most people will just take the W and go on. And I'd be like, ooh, this went so well, I'm going to stop what I'm doing, write a blog post, and then and that blog post couldn't take me more than 2 hours, and then the blog post takes a day and a half, and then I spend half a day promoting the blog post, or dealing with inbound feedback about the blog post, and then I finally get back to work, and I've kind of forgotten what I was even doing. That's a habit of mine that I've had forever, and it's handy when you're, a consultant and you're trying to make a name for yourself, but it is counterproductive to shipping a thing quickly. And additionally, I'm just bad at estimating. I'm overly optimistic, because at a high level, I'm like, well, there's only this many features, there's only this many moving parts. Like, could I build that in a weekend? Yeah, I could build that in a weekend, sort of. But like, it would probably fall over, and it would have a whole lot of other problems. I might spend months tweaking or just like struggling with a hard to maintain thing. Yeah, so my expectation going in was this would be like a January to March project, and it became a January to April project. May was an intermission, and then it became a crunch mode, really, really full-time thing, June to August. So effectively, I guess that's like, probably it balances out to about 6 months of a full-time job of just pure development, and then maybe another month of fix up and stabilization and just sort of, feedback requests and that sort of thing. So I was, I only overshot my estimate by 120%. Thanks for the note, Eric. I'll do one more, maybe two more. And I'm going to call it. I'm going to drink a gallon of water, and then it's not going to be even 9 a.m. yet. I'm going to brunch today. This is a pre-brunch podcast. Tell me about Searls.co. BMF. No name was provided. BMFS. I'm not going to put the numbers at the end. I don't want you to guess their email address. Tell me about Searls.co. Searls.co is a domain name. It is a domain name that I registered because Doc Searls, he of the co-author of the Clue Train Manifesto and open source and Harvard Business Fellow, writer. He's a little older than me. He got a jump start on all the internet things. He's had Searls.com since I think 94. And so I got the next best thing. So Searls.co is domain name. Of course, justin.searls.co is my homepage, which, makes people curious. What am I saving the root name for? If you go there, you'll see that it is a homepage for Searls Co. or, Searls LLC, which is me and my brother's business. We do weird stuff, I would say. Really, it's our vehicle for any sort of product and service that we're doing. And that can be everything from, we've done subcontracting for military contractors for I'll just say it's 3D printing related. We've done props for theme parks already. Also 3D printing related. Jeremy's the 3D printer in the family. I modeled for him once. He wanted to make an action figure of me, and he did. But the 3D scan fucked up my leg, so it just looks like I've got like a dog gnawed off my calf. But I'm very proud of that. Got every single wrinkle in my khaki shorts that day. What else have we done? I'm blanking. He's got if he ever has gigs when he's in costume, he does superhero costume work, also 3D print adjacent, but also combined with performance art. And he's done, I think he's run some commercial photo shoots through the company as well. So this is a lot about him. I have so far been more focused on the better with Becky side of the fence in the Searles family of brands. But so I guess you could probably say that was some sort of rate swap with that company. But it's since it's all house money and doesn't matter, it's kind of like a wash, at least according to our tax guy. What I plan to do there in the future, at some point, is build real applications. Now, I don't know if I want to share those applications with you, or if I want to sell them or what, but those will also run under Searles.co. So if I make the fuck this.app series of apps like I've announced and shared in another domain I bought, those will all be, from a business perspective, owned by Searles LLC. So that's what that is. Thank you for asking. Whoever you are. Spencer writes in. Spencer says, subject, double click on this. Not even all the way through version 23 yet, but let's double click on that is currently at the top of my most hated jargon list, and I died when you mentioned it. I'm not sure if it's a Boston/Northeast thing, but I had never heard it until I started working with Boston companies. I'd never connected it to the Rands people, but if that's a thing, then I need to avoid Rands chat. I had a couple people write in that they were either extremely excited that I shat on Rands and Repose or extremely offended that I shat on Rands and Repose. So people feel strongly. Let's double click on that. Why do you have so much of your identity wrapped up in an online community for people who want to become better managers of people? What does that say about you? Whether you're for or against it, it's just, why do we care? The reason that I care is that almost everyone, every time that I've heard of this thing, Rands particularly, it's been a asshole, like a real fucking just piece of work guy, always a guy who's telling me that, he, in all other areas of life, is kind of a know-it-all dickbag person and not particularly smart, not particularly, effective or socially aware, doesn't read a room well. This is a caricature I'm drawing now as I have 5 or 6 faces kind of come up in front of me. And then they pull out of their back pocket a little card that says, well, if you knew anything about people and managing people and empathy and how people work and what drives people and motivates people and how people get along and how people communicate and how they network and how they get stuff done from Rands and Repose like I do. Like I'm in that chat every day. doing the hard work. I know. So that's why you're wrong. And so they'd use it just like any other kind of chit to try to get an advantage. Because what I found is that people who are often like, socially awkward or inarticulate or not really, clear thinkers in their own right will very often try to find extrinsic credibility to say that, like, I matter and my perspective is valid because of this association that I have with this other thing. And so this conversation that I'm having with you about this topic, I want to one up you, or I'm competing with you to win this argument or this conversation. And the way that I'm going to do that, since I am apparently failing to do it by din of my own skill and ability and thought, I'm going to instead play this card, the Rands and Repose card, as if we're literally playing Magic the fucking meeting the gathering, I'm going to win it by playing this card. And one of the reasons why this card is so effective is if you don't know my various shibboleths and my Rands and Repose people, like, it becomes unfalsifiable. It's like, okay, man, I guess if they're right, then sure. It's an appeal to authority. It's a classic, argumentation fallacy, but there we go. So yeah, that's me double clicking on that for you. Fuck's sake. Thank you to everyone who wrote in. If you would like to write in, you could reach the podcast at podcast@searles.co, and I will read it, and I will do my best to respond to it. And then if it strikes my fancy, I might talk about it on a podcast. I will say, it may be a little while. I think it's going to be 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. At least 3.5 weeks until you hear from me again. If I come back, jury is still out. It's been good speaking with y'all, wherever you are and however you are. I hope you're well. And I'll leave you with this thought. It was only a few months ago that customer service support people, like, if they're reading from a script, and especially if it's like an offshore call center, it's only been like a few months in my experience since they stopped saying stay safe at the end of the call. Like, so COVID, right? Like, resulted in all these scripts getting updated, be like, yada, yada, yada. It's like, instead of like, take care, have a good day or whatever, it's like, bye-bye for see you later, right? Whatever. I forgot what they say because it was so striking that after COVID hit, suddenly all corporate communication included, and stay safe, like it was like an alcohol ad. Or a sex ed class. And then, of course, for several years after the COVID outbreak, you'd still, even much later than people around us seem to care about COVID, the only time I'd really hear about it is like stuff like Instacart sending a push notification and saying, hey, be courteous and like leave space for the safety of our drivers, and was calling into, customer support for fixing a fucking, I don't know, like remote control on my ceiling fan doesn't work. And he's like, thank you for your time today. Is that everything? Is yes. They said, no. Okay. Well, have a great day and stay safe. I'm like, thank you, remote control man. I will. You too. Right? Here we are in June of 2024, which is the last time that I heard this. So we're just out of the stay safe woods. That was the entirety of Joe Biden's presidency was one big stay safe at the end of a phone call. And they just stopped. And so my only hope, right, is that we're not in some sort of like middle of the bell curve where 4 years from now, they're going to have to start saying stay safe at the end of the phone calls again. If we can just do that, I'll call that a win.